a very good morning to you just after 6 o'clock on Saturday, January the 4th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Hello, welcome along. Thanks ever so much for your company on this fine day. Right, as you would expect this morning, I have great news for you. Yes, that's right. It's World Braille Day today, a day to recognise the importance of Braille, which is fundamental to those who are blind, those people who are deaf-blind, and those who are visually impaired. Now, today's celebration actually marks the birth of a chap called Louis Braille. He created the system of reading and writing using raised dots. Clever man.
Sing the Braille alphabet song. A.
Oh, you've outdone yourself, Dave. Also, today is World Hypnotism Day. It's a day that shines a light on the myths and fears about using hypnotism. Actually, it can be extremely useful in tackling people's fears and, of course, in ditching bad habits, of which I have
the light. Listen to your own voice.
Also today, much more importantly, it's World Spaghetti Day. Of course it is. It's a day that encourages you to embrace this pasta dish. So what do you fancy? Do you fancy a carbonara, a spag bol? You choose. And on that note, a bit early for pasta, I think, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Let's move on and start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So, at the 6 o'clock hour, here are some fascinating facts for you. On this day in 1642, under the orders of King Charles I, armed soldiers entered Parliament, and the English Civil War started shortly afterwards. On this day in 1938, Bertram Mills's circus became the first ever circus to be shown on television. Now, this was also the first time that a paying audience for any event had been televised, and the audience members themselves were actually informed they could request seats out of the range of cameras. The circus was originally from Paddington in London, where my medical school is. His circus actually became famous in Britain for its Christmas shows at Olympia in West London, and the troupe were the last to perform with live animals on the Drury Lane Theatre stage. And on this day in 2017, the very last ABC cinema closed its doors. This was in Bournemouth. It had actually opened in 1937. It had only kept its name by a quirk of positioning in the town. Now, I wonder if you can guess what was the final film that they played. Well, the answer to that question was Back to the Future. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning. 5 minutes past 6, Saturday, January the 4th. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm joined, and I'm delighted to say, by Monica Price, nutritionist and health and wellbeing expert. Good morning. Happy New Year.
Good morning, David, and Happy New Year to you too.
How was Christmas?
Oh, it was lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really lovely. Just a bit of downtime with the family, some nice long walks. It's just nice just to relax a little bit.
I got 2 whole days off. But I told everyone last week I had a bit of a catalogue of disaster.
Oh, no.
My heating broke, water came through the ceiling, the dog ate the cheese. You know, the usual.
Just the usual. Why do all these things always happen, though, at this time of year? Everybody's always got those sort of problems at this time of year.
That's a brilliant point, which is the heating was fine until I got back on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, there we are, you see. And ovens go off. My friend's oven just suddenly decided to not work on Christmas Day. So that was it, but lovely, thank you.
Good. It's interesting, isn't it? We forget people who've done amazing things. The introduction of Braille and Louis Braille. I mean, it's opened up a huge world of possibility for those people who obviously have impairment in their sight, or if they're deaf-blind.
Yes.
And now, deaf-blind is a condition of little or no useful hearing and little or no useful sight. And of course, the idea that you come up with that raised pattern of dots, I mean, it really is extraordinary.
And such a clever, simple thing to do. Can you imagine? Just think. And I wonder what made him think about it. You know, how did he come up with it?
I don't know.
I wonder that I'm always fascinated by how they actually got to think, oh, I know, I'll do some raised letters. But I mean, my mum had, her sight was really impaired, and she used to use it all the time, especially in lifts, because obviously she couldn't really see. And these new lifts, you know, when you go into a hotel lift, I often think she's passed now, but in the new lifts you have to have your card, and then you put your card against a sort of a scanner, and then it allows you to do your floor numbers. Well, that doesn't. How is that going to work with the visually impaired? because they can't see the scanner.
That's a brilliant point.
So
I
only thought about it because of my mum.
Do they not have Braille around the scanner?
No, they don't. There's Braille on the numbers of the door, so you'd have to. But you know, there was a gentleman this morning, and I was coming out of my hotel, and he was struggling because he didn't know where to. He kept pushing the button, and I said, "Oh, you need to put the key up against the scanner." So it's the simple things like that that people just don't think about that really affect people's everyday lives.
It's a brilliant point.
Oh, it's just it's a fantastic thing that he did. So well done,
It is. Well done him.
Yes.
Shall we talk about what's going on in the newspapers this morning if you are just waking up? Let me just show you the front page of the Times. Keir Starmer really hoped the new year would bring some joy. He could have a reset of government. And of course, he's not just dealing with forces in this country, he's dealing with forces elsewhere. So this is the big story this morning. This is the Starmer, he wants to say, and actually on Monday there's a big speech about the NHS and the change of direction and his priorities. But obviously he's got much bigger problems because Donald Trump has attacked him. Elon Musk has attacked him as well. Trump says it is a very big mistake by increasing the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas. And basically, he's saying you're an idiot because you need to be fracking. We want cheap energy in this country. And then Elon Musk has waded in over this row over grooming gangs.
I know. You know, and again, you see, he's under attack all the time, isn't he? And it seems like every step he takes at the moment, he's under attack. So, you know, but he's a lawyer. You see, we forget that Keir Starmer is a lawyer, and lawyers are used to being attacked. And in my own little world, I think, you know, this man is taking all these attacks and doesn't seem to be affected by any of these criticisms.
You don't think he is?
Well,
I think he is affected.
I just think he gives this persona that he's not, which of course that makes people think, are you actually listening to us? You know, and this is why I think so many people are wading in on him.
I mean,
I don't know how that's going to work out.
But certainly from our listeners and viewers, this will be music to their ears. What people want is cheap energy.
Absolutely.
And the government has this zealotry for net zero by 2030. We know Ed Miliband is obsessed by this, onshore and offshore windmills. When you have the president-elect saying, get rid of the windmills, you need to frack, which is essentially what he's saying, I think people around this country will think, good on Trump.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think, you know, Trump he's wading in for a reason, isn't he? You know, he's a very clever man, Donald Trump, and obviously Elon Musk, has just become kind of Donald Trump's right-hand man, it appears at the moment.
Very much.
So
you know, he's even renting a property. Well, he's renting a property at Mar-a-Lago. He's actually on the compound. I mean, they're like this, those
they
two.
are, and you know that because every time you see Trump now, somewhere you can see Musk in the background or next to him or something. So it's a good thing, but you know, they're two very powerful men.
They are.
So the rest of the world is going to be watching what these do.
Also, there's another major problem for Starmer here, which is the issue of the grooming gangs has raised its head again. I spoke about it. I didn't do breakfast yesterday, but the day before, this had all started to come up again about the fact the government will not allow a public inquiry to take place in this. And Musk has waded into this, saying Starmer has failed to prosecute gangs that groomed and raped girls. This is such a strong statement. He said, this is on yesterday, he said Starmer was complicit in the rape of Britain when he was head of the Crown prosecution for 6 years. Starmer must go and he must face charges for his complicity in the worst mass crimes in British history. That's
a very strong, bold statement to make, isn't it? Which makes me think, you know, that they are... There's a game plan here, I think. You know, I mean, look at, if you think he's been in power now for 6 months, Starmer, and look at how many failings we've seen. You know, in my view, you know, with the elderly, you know, and all the things he said before he was elected. Obviously now coming to power, you know, I'm not going to touch anything to do with the elderly.
He basically lied.
He just lied, and everything. And we've got videos of him saying it, loads of interviews, and then he just comes on and he's completely reversed. Not just done a little alteration to it. He's just completely altered what he said he was going to do.
Well, I think there are lots of things, you know, the abolition of the winter fuel allowance, of course, which has landed a lot of elderly people in huge trouble. Meanwhile, Wes Streeting, and I'm sort of going off topic here, but Wes Streeting then says, oh, well, turn the heating on.
I know, that was one of the things that I earmarked. Honestly, David, I can't believe he actually made... What a crash statement to make.
Totally crass. And also, if you haven't got the money, and as a medic, I've spent a lot of time with older people who are so frightened to put the heating on. They're in a front room with 1 bar electric fire on. And in fact, when I was in A&E, I used to see elderly people with burns because they sat too close to the electric fire.
Yeah,
because they are so cold.
And I think the sale of electric blankets, you know, electric blankets, not just on the bed, but ones that you can actually, like a rug, like a blanket you put over on the sofa, they went up by something like 75%, you know, when this was announced, because people can't afford to put their heating on. And the trouble is, when you can't afford to put your heating on, then there's more of a risk. If you do that on a daily basis, for someone that's elderly, you know, they'll start to just seize up. Their bodies will start to seize up.
And then they end up in hospital.
And then they get dehydrated because they don't move around so much, especially if they live alone. So it's appalling.
They don't eat properly.
It's appalling, and I don't know how we can do it. But by what he did, I read you probably read this, David. There was, I think the payment, the winter fuel payment was £325 for any minister, Labour minister, to just sit in the House of Commons per day. They get £325. So hang on a minute. How is that?
You see,
how is that justified?
And we've spoken about this before. As your first policy coming into government, I just think it's incredibly heartless.
It is.
It's ill thought through. It's heartless, and it will condemn older people to an earlier death. I have no doubt about that at all. Let's go back to the grooming gangs thing, because this is the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. This is Maggie Oliver. She's waded into this as well. Now, Maggie Oliver is basically a whistleblower. She helped to expose the failure to tackle the paedophile gangs in Rochdale. She basically intervened and said Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over the failures to tackle grooming gangs. She's a former detective. I have a lot of time for Maggie Oliver. I've interviewed Maggie Oliver, and she essentially has been on the sidelines. She was there. She saw it, and now she has launched a full frontal, a broadside at Keir Starmer.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Well done her. You know, in my opinion, well done her, because how brave is that? Because she knows she's going to get a lot of flack for that. But again, she's standing up for what she believes in. And when you look at the story and the history of this, it's appalling. It's appalling. He was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service. So during his time there, when he was in charge, he knew all of this was going on, but did little about it. Did something about it, but did little about it.
Not very much.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at what Maggie Oliver said, she says it's a time for a totally independent investigation. This is on the back of Jess Phillips saying we are not going to have a public inquiry into what went on. Well, I think we need a public inquiry.
I agree.
We need to understand why these people are allowed to get away. And what they did was so abhorrent.
Yes.
It's utterly disgusting.
Yeah.
And now some of them have faced justice. But I want to know a lot more about what did people know, when did they know it, and why didn't they talk about it?
Yeah, I totally agree, David. I think there seems to be a little bit of a cover-up going on here. I think, you know, why? I always think if you've got nothing to hide, why not have a full public inquiry? There's clearly something they've got to hide. Otherwise, they would be doing it, because he must know, with everything else that's going on in Starmer's life at the moment, this is not going to go away, because you've got victims and you've got somebody who, as you say, like you know, the former Greater Manchester, she's Greater Manchester, wasn't she? Maggie Oliver, who's going to stand up and keep shouting. And so rightly so. If you read some of the cases of what happened, it's too horrendous even to speak about.
And you know, some of them I was reading about a 13-year-old girl who went to the police, and the police told her to go away when she wasn't drunk. She even provided samples, and it was just ignored.
Yes.
I mean, Maggie Oliver is in such an unusual position because she is an expert. She was there. She witnessed all of this. She knows exactly what went on. But she said the Labour and Conservatives are equally to blame for failing to get to grips with the scandal. And she goes further to say Keir Starmer, because he was former DPP, is perhaps as guilty as anyone I know in where we find ourselves today.
Yeah.
We all know what's going on. I don't trust a single one of those who to date have been entrusted with keeping our children safe and prosecuting serial rapists. They have failed repeatedly, knowingly and criminally. Now, when Keir Starmer actually was in 2022 when he actually addressed the failings of this. So, sorry, he spoke in 2012.
Yeah.
This is at the end of his tenure as the head of the DPP. He talked word soup. He said, in a number of cases presented to us, particularly in cases involving groups, there's clearly an issue of ethnicity that needs to be understood and addressed. As prosecutors, we shouldn't shy away from that. But if we're honest, it's the approach to the victims, the credibility issue that's caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. No, you didn't investigate this properly.
Exactly.
You were frightened to talk up.
Yes.
And this is two-tier policing in this country, and it is unacceptable.
Yeah. Again, David, when I read that myself, I thought, I can't believe that they make such statements like that and think it's okay to make a statement like that. You know, I agree. I think that the thing here is that there's clearly some kind of cover-up. There's clearly more information that needs to be given to the public. Do you
want an inquiry?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And for the women, for the girl, do you know what? They weren't even women, David. These were young girls that were raped, repeatedly raped, and
passed around like inanimate objects.
Exactly. And that 13-year-old girl, the one you were talking about, who went to the police, she left the police station, was only to be picked up by two of the guys again, and was raped again. In what world should we even allow that to happen?
Well, we shouldn't.
No, exactly.
Zero tolerance.
There has to be a zero tolerance on that behaviour. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter. If you've been raped, what does it matter? The colour of your skin doesn't come into it. The fact that you're raped does.
And actually, I know a lot of friends of mine are police officers, and they talk about the fact they have to tiptoe around things, that they can't actually say what they want to say because of political correctness, and it's unacceptable, and people won't tolerate it. Very quickly, I have to go to the break. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, again, this is going to make you very exercised this morning. Fast-track NHS care for asylum seekers. That's right, you can't see a GP, you can't actually get treatment in a hospital, but that's OK, because if you're an asylum seeker, you can be seen within 15 minutes. This feeds nicely into the brand new poll. This is an MRP poll, which is going to make very difficult reading for the Labour Party. So the latest predictions, according to this poll, carried out by Stonehaven, it's an MRP poll. It's a significant poll. Labour loses 133 seats, going down to 278. The Conservatives go up 36 to 157. Reform UK gains 115 MPs, taking them to 120, which puts them as the third biggest party in the British Parliament. This is going to make very difficult reading for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, and is that not an unprecedented amount of people, given the time that Starmer's been in power?
I think it's the worst performing government in history.
Well, there we are. That says it all, doesn't it? And here we are with Donald Trump just about to become the new president. You know, Elon Musk, he's obviously going to be very much part of the Trump's presidency, and yet Starmer just seems to be doing everything wrong. Everything he touches at the moment.
Let me just ask you a quick question before I do go to the break. How much trouble is he in?
I would say a lot. I would say a lot of trouble. I don't think he realises it. I think is he hiding it? Does he realise it, but he's just not showing it? Because he certainly doesn't show it, because every time he's interviewed, he just dispels it. And I think so. It's either, does he know it, but he's thinking, OK, I'm just going to put this front on. And where are his advisors, David? He has a whole host of advisors around him. Surely some of them are saying, do you know what? I think we need to take a step back and have a look and see what we're doing here. And not just him, but the rest of his politicians around him. I
mean, it seems that he's attacking every single group in this country. And you can tell from that MRP poll, people are very unhappy, including lifelong Labour supporters, very unhappy with the direction. Thank you for the moment. Really good to see you this morning, Monica.
Thank you.
Let me throw that open to you, if I may, this morning. Keir Starmer, new year. It's meant to be a year where he can turn over the page, where he has a reset. He's got this big speech on the NHS on Monday. The problem for him is he's fighting fires on multiple fronts already, and he's being attacked not only in this country, but also from the United States, from the president-elect, from Elon Musk. And that brings me to the question this morning. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? I tend to think, like Monica, he's in a lot of trouble over this. The number, 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. After the break, we'll take you through all of this morning's front pages. Monica has also chosen some very choice stories, including Wes Streeting, who has some amazingly sage advice to older people. Turn the heating on. Well, that's helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is Talk.
is over, like, you know, the threat picture has moved on. But yeah, exactly as you say, this is a reminder that actually it hasn't, and it has still, whether it's kind of the old guard of Al-Qaeda who are kind of more loyal to bin Laden and want to attack the US for those reasons, or as looks possible in the case of New Orleans, there's kind of this cast of like outcast misfits and losers that ISIS is still actually able to inspire domestically. So there's kind of the two different elements of the threat there, but it still is a threat.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Talk. This is Weekend Breakfast, 6:25, Saturday, January the 4th. I have my own nutritionist with me this morning. Monica Price joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning,
Again.
good morning.
You're looking very fresh and bright.
Thank you. It's because we're drinking water. You see, your New Year's resolution should be to drink more water.
Now, this lot say I drink too much water.
Well,
But
I don't know how much you drink.
I do like a bit of water. But, you know, it keeps me young. I'm only 87, you know.
Yeah, there we are.
Lots of messages coming in. Good morning, David. I'm on my way to Donny from Tring to visit my mum. This is Phil. Good morning and Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. Hope it's a wonderful year for you and yours. All the best, Phil. That's really sweet. Thank you very much. Sharon Miller, one of our regulars. Good morning to you. Good morning, Dr. Bull. I love the shirt this morning. Thank you. I thought it was autumnal, actually. Anyway, can we get Trump and Musk to run the country? Because I think they would do a far better job than that useless, pathetic Starmer, that Sharon in Staffordshire. One more. How the hell can asylum seekers get fast-track NHS care before British citizens? Is this a blinking joke? No, sadly not. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. Yes. This is going to make you choke on your cornflakes this morning. The headline is fast-track NHS care for asylum seekers. Yes, you heard that right. Now, we know that people cannot be seen in A&E. According to the latest figures, 25% of people had to wait more than 4 hours to be seen in A&E in November. And the one way to be seen much faster is to be an asylum seeker. That's right. So if you're an undocumented migrant, if you're homeless, if you're a drug addict, you are then seen under a policy called 987 Inclusion Health. They have to have an urgent assessment according to this. They can ask for an appointment at A&E. They are bumped up the queue on arrival. So if you're an asylum seeker, you just wander in and you say, I'm an asylum seeker, I need to be seen now, and you are seen now. That seems deeply unfair. Many people saying this sums up broken Britain, doesn't it?
Again, you know, you look at it, you actually read this story, you just think, well, I like to see the logic. Where's the logic in this? And there isn't any logic, David. That's the thing. There isn't any logic to what they're doing. You know, yes, of course they need to see a doctor. Of course they do. You know, they've come into here illegally, but they're here and we're letting them in. So they
get free medical care.
And they get free medical care. So, OK, but why should they take priority over people that are still waiting patiently for operations, for just to see a doctor? Let alone just an operation, just to actually go into a surgery and see a doctor.
So the law is that in the UK, even refused asylum seekers can still register with a GP. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they can receive primary care free of charge, regardless of the immigration status. Now, in Scotland and Wales, they're also entitled to free hospital care in the same terms as any other ordinary resident. Steve Barclay, the former health secretary, said it is outrageous that those here illegally are prioritised over British taxpayers. I would think most of the country would agree with you.
I would think so too. And if you think what you just said, that so even if they've been refused, they can still register for a doctor.
Until they're deported.
Didn't know that. You see, probably. I wonder when these laws were made, because when these laws were made, maybe we didn't have such a problem with illegal immigrants coming in. And I always think, David, when you've got immigrants, I was discussing this with some friends over Christmas. When a man leaves alone, his country alone, he's planning to go to war. This is just, and I thought this is such a good sort of analogy of it. So when a man walks away from his own country because of whatever, because of bombing or whatever, he's going to war. He leaves it to go to war. If he goes with his family, he's fleeing the country because of some terrible thing that's going on in that country. What amazes me is that all the immigrants that we have are men. Where are the women and children?
We have a lot of single men.
Yeah, a lot of single men. And I'm thinking, well, why? If it was that bad, why would you leave your family and your children behind?
Yeah.
And I know it's a sort of an ideal, it's an ideal sort of analogy of it, but
aren't they?
It's
also, I mean, to be fair, when you look at us and the way we treat people compared with the rest of Europe, come to the UK, we'll hotel you, we'll give you food. Do you know what? I think I might be an illegal migrant because then I can at least have a hotel.
I know.
And I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
When you look at the numbers, though, more than 150,000 illegal migrants have crossed since the small boats began, the crisis. So let me just put that into perspective. That is a town the size of Cambridge, Ipswich or Blackpool.
Wow. That's crazy,
so
isn't it?
How can the infrastructure cope? It can't. Successive governments have failed to keep track of all of this. And that is why that MRP poll is so interesting. The fact, and are you surprised?
No, that's the thing, because when you read the stats, it's quite alarming. And I think people have almost switched off from it, David, because they know it's happening, but it's actually it's too much now. They don't want to know about it because it is every day. It's thousands, and at what point are we going to say no? At what point are we going to say that's it, we can't take any more?
And you know that Labour is in trouble when papers like The Eye, this is the front page, Starmer faces growing threat from reform over migration poll. When you've got papers which tend to be more favourable to the government, I mean, even The Guardian isn't exactly glowing in its praise of Keir Starmer. Starmer attempts new reset with plans to cut NHS waits. So let me just throw that back out to you this morning. Just your thoughts, really, on the fact that if you come here as an asylum seeker, you get fast-track treatment into the NHS, you're given food and lodging, and you're stuck in a hotel. Someone's just messaged saying, can I please be an asylum seeker? I can be fast-tracked. And that is the problem. You can't see a GP at the best of times. And, of course, Keir Starmer has this set-piece speech which he's going to deliver on Monday. I think they're going to pledge that you have to be able to see a doctor within a certain time frame. We're not entirely sure what he's going to say at the moment. But where are these doctors coming from?
Yeah, exactly. How are we going to manage all of this? There's a lack of doctors and nurses and hospital staff as it is. So how are we actually going to manage all of this? And
then very quickly, before the break, Daily Mail, you picked out this amazing piece of advice, didn't you?
Yes, from
the health sector.
From Mr. Streeting, who said, the headline, Minister cruel to tell elderly to put on heating. So, as we know, he took away the £300 extra, and that affected, David, over 10 million OAPs. So not just a few, 10 million. OK, his statement was, but Mr. Streeting said the cold snap had made it a weekend to layer up and put the heating on as well. When asked about concerned elderly Britons being nervous to turn on the fire because of the lack of funding, he added, I'll just remind people that the Chancellor did take the decision to protect the winter fuel allowance for the poorest pensioners. So what about the 10 million then that he took from? What about those? Again, it doesn't make any sense. And I think that was such a crash statement to make. When people are already struggling, when the elderly are already... We know they are. I know they are. I've got elderly neighbours who I'm now keeping an eye on.
How do they suddenly become so detached from reality? So West Streeting, isn't he Ilford or something? So
yes,
he should know. Ilford's quite an interesting constituency. So you've got wealth there, but you've actually got true poverty.
Yeah, you have. Yes, you have.
So I don't understand how he can be so out of touch.
And he seemed to be almost the way he talks is almost like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. And it is, and that alone is going to make people think, why did I vote Labour if you did vote Labour?
But of course the MPs also claim their own expenses.
Well,
there's another story about claiming second home allowances and heating and all the rest of it.
I think fundamentally, I know he's done so many mistakes, Starmer, but I think that was one of the worst ones he did. First of all, he really just, because all the interviews came out when he said, I'm going to support the elderly, I'm going to protect them, there's no way I'm going to take anything away from them. And he completely changed his mind.
I think the other, two-faced, bare lie they said was they wouldn't increase tax, national insurance or VAT, and promptly increase employers' national insurance, which has made companies really struggle. And the other attack, which I think is unforgivable, is on the farmers.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I live in the country, so I'm a big supporter of farmers. They've been coming through with their tractors, honking their horns, and absolutely, why did he do that? Well, you see, again, it's all about money. He's just trying to make sure that the Bank of England, our lovely bank, and this party have lots of money. What about actually the fact that there's so many suicides, David? Now, the suicide rate has increased.
And
the moment it was announced, the moment it was announced, four people committed suicide that day.
I would like to see him become a farmer.
Yes.
And see how hard it is.
He should spend a week on a farm and see how he manages that with no heating.
Now that is a great reality show. Keir Starmer.
Oh yeah, Keir Starmer on a farm. Let's do it. You heard it here first.
Let's pitch that. How do you feel? Thanks, Monica, for the moment. How do you feel about the news this morning? You're in asylum seeker, you get fast track healthcare. Keir Starmer, how much trouble is he in? I think quite a lot. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. After the break, we'll go through all of this morning's front pages. I promise. I know I keep promising that we will do that. We'll take your calls as well. Get in touch, please. Let me know your thoughts. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 6:37. Monica's reading me her text messages. Good morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning, David. This is Lee in Beverley in the East Riding of Yorkshire. Very posh. Good morning, David. Fabulous show. I'm up early to see some supercars and Ferraris at the Motorist Cafe in Schönborn in Elmet, near Leeds. Wow. Ooh. Okay, enjoy your supercars, but I'm glad you've tuned in this morning. Hi, David and Monica. I'm surprised. This is Natasha. Good morning. With a huge amount of trouble Starmer is already in, and the popularity of Labour, or unpopularity of Labour, that they would retain as many as 300 seats. Yes, we were talking about that MRP poll and the latest data, which I'll bring you again now. So Labour would lose 133 seats, which takes them down to 278. I mean, that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? set to lose 133 seats in 6 months. I mean, that's pretty good going. But anyway, Natasha says, I'm amazed they would retain as many as 300 seats, according to the poll you just quoted. They need to be wiped out. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Let's take a voice note now. This is James, who wants to talk about the grooming gangs. Good morning to you.
Good morning, David. Just regarding the grooming gangs. Now, head should roll for this. Starmer needs to resign. If he's got any decency in him whatsoever, he should resign. Absolutely shocking. And the fact that they've just knighted Sadid Khan and Gareth Southgate, people like the brilliant Maggie Smith should be knighted for her brilliant work. She had the courage to speak out. Thanks, mate.
I think you mean Maggie Oliver, but I take the point, absolutely right. And I just still can't get my head round what he said in 2012. I mean, it's just utter word salad. It's just word salad. In a number of cases presented to us, particularly in cases involving groups, there's clearly an issue of ethnicity that needs to be understood and addressed. As prosecutors, we shouldn't shy away from that, but if we're honest, it's the approach to the victims, the credibility issue, that's caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. No, there wasn't. You didn't confront the truth.
That's it, exactly that. Where is the truth? We don't know the truth, really, do we? Because we need. That's why we need a public inquiry. It all seems to be a little bit mishmashy. They've told us what they think they should tell us, but we need a full.
Well,
public
they tried
inquiry.
to tell us as little as possible,
yes,
didn't they?
Exactly.
And this is the front page of the Daily Mail. Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. This is Maggie Oliver, former police officer, who has spoken out front page, and that is going to make very, very difficult reading for the Prime Minister. I wonder how long he will remain Prime Minister. Let's take a caller. Sophie is in Essex. Good morning to you, Sophie.
Good morning to you, Dr. David. Great show as always.
Thank you. Bless you.
I wanted to talk to you about the grooming gangs, but can we please call them what they actually are? They're rape gangs.
Yep.
And I've never been so cross in my life. I'm absolutely incensed. As a mother and actually as a human being, I cannot believe what I am reading.
Yeah.
I always used to follow Jess Phillips. I actually quite admired her, even though our politics was so far different. It was ridiculous. But, I used to watch her on Have I Got News For You. I always thought that she was in it not just for herself, but she has proved, just like the rest of this appalling government, that she's just after what she can do for herself and her job, and she is doing it as a pack, and it is disgusting. And we should be protecting these children.
Of course.
There should not be politics anywhere near this subject. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to you both, but I am so cross. And, party politics should be nowhere near. If you get into this position of power, you should be able to protect these children, and they are children.
They are children. You're absolutely right. And Monica and I were talking about these cases of a 13-year-old girl who went to the police, was ignored by the police, and they told her to come back when she wasn't drunk. She then was picked up, I think it was by two men who then raped her again. And here we have a systemic failure of the systems and justice to actually bring these people, appalling people, to justice. Now, there's also more that's coming out. Simon Danchuk, who is a friend of this programme, he was the former MP for Rochdale, claimed that the ex-chairman of Labour's parliamentary party had warned him against drawing attention to the ethnicity of the grooming gangs. Now, I just want to stress, by the way, in terms of, I am very mindful that the safety and security of members of Parliament is paramount. We've seen what's happened in the past with people like Joe Cox. But that being said, I totally agree with you that Jess Phillips is wrong. She is basically protecting the Prime Minister, isn't she?
Yes, 100%. And ethnicity shouldn't come anywhere even near this subject. If somebody is abusing little girls, then they should be held to account, no matter their gender, their creed, their origin. It shouldn't matter. And as for the little girl, the 13-year-old little girl that was turned away from the police station and told to come back when she was sober, well, was the fact that she was not drunk a little bit of a red flag to start with anyway?
Yeah. And when you look at the numbers, 9 men convicted of sex trafficking and other offences in Rochdale, including rape in 2012, 8 British Pakistani origin, 1 was an Afghan asylum seeker. Since then, a further 33 men have been convicted, and Greater Manchester Police has apologised, so it's not good enough.
It's absolutely not good enough, and we should keep yelling this from the rooftops until something is going to happen and take place, and we can protect these children.
So just in terms of going forward, do you think an inquiry is the right solution here? Because inquiries tend to go on for a very long time. I want to see heads roll.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all I've been seeing all over social media the last 24 hours is the left trying to protect Just Phillips and Keir Starmer and basically saying, well, you know, the Tories were in government for 14 years. No, I'm sorry. Don't keep looking back. We're not going in that direction. You're in government now. You're in power now, and you have the ability to do something about it. So do it. Words are cheap, and it should be done, and it needs to happen.
How much trouble is Starmer in?
Oh, I'm gobsmacked he's still there, if I'm honest. I mean, I've been interested in politics since I was a child, and never in my entire life have I seen so much go so wrong and just clueless, utterly clueless. I mean, down from the sublime to the ridiculous. It's just, you know, the winter. I mean, I walked my dog yesterday morning and it was bitterly cold, and all I could think about was the poor pensioners. I had drinks with a girlfriend last night, and she said that they had a friend of theirs that was just £2 over the threshold, and he was terrified. He'd had to sell his car, and he couldn't put his heating on because he was £2 over.
Yeah. And finally, can I just ask you about Wes Streeting's comments to the elderly people, to all of those people, those 10 million people who missed out on the winter fuel payment? Wes Streeting says, turn the heating on.
Well, it's Marie Antoinette, isn't it? Let them in cake. Yeah. I mean, it's just, he's literally in his ivory tower, getting his nice salary and his expenses. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that we should be paying these people a decent wage because we want the right people in government, but we don't have the right people in government.
We don't.
And they are just so far removed. It is utterly ridiculous. And we are going to get deaths. And if it was their grandparents and veterans, you know, these are vulnerable people and veterans. These are the people that served our country, gave up their lives so that we had freedom and freedom of speech, and so that we had a nice life ahead of us. And what are we doing to them now? We're throwing them away.
We are. Sophie, thank you very much for your call, a very passionate call there. Sophie from Essex. We'll take more of your voice notes and your calls after this break. Also, we'll talk about more of the stories that are making the headlines this morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Nonsense. It really is. And
the whole thing, she's trying to create something and then turn it into something that it isn't. She's sort of very strange. We're not in the pursuit of perfection. We're in the pursuit of joy.
Yeah, joy.
I mean, it's so...
Surely she should just admit it. She's in the pursuit of money, isn't she? Isn't that what she's up in pursuit of?
Yeah, she's after Gwyneth Paltrow's place, who makes as much and much of money from what she does.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
6:49, Saturday, January the 4th, front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. Maggie Oliver, former police officer, wading into this, saying that actually as head of the DPP, he is complicit in what is going on. Huge pressure now mounting on the government over this. Maggie Oliver says she has no faith in the Prime Minister's desire to get the truth. Of course, she helped to expose the failure to tackle those paedophile gangs in Rochdale. Actually, the caller just before the break, and she's right. You know, we talk about grooming gangs. They're not. These are rape gangs. And I think you have to actually be really blunt in that language.
You know, the caller we just had, it was really moving, because I as we were just discussing, you know, we're forgetting these are young girls. They're not women. They were young girls, and young girls were being exploited. And
continually ignored.
Exactly. And somebody has to be made to be accountable for that. And Keir Starmer, he can dodge it and do all he likes, but he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service during that time, between 2008 and 2013. So he has to be accountable for that. So at what point is he going to be accountable for that?
Well, I mean, as I said, he
just seems to just...
Well, he delivers word salad. In fact,
yes,
Sarah
I
Wilson...
love that expression.
Well, it is word salad. I mean, it's just completely... It's just nonsensical.
Let's just see words. Yeah, let's just talk words. But what's really worrying is he thinks that people are going to believe those word salad, as you kindly put it. You know, he thinks that the public are actually going to believe what he's saying. Well, I'm afraid the public aren't. You know, when you're dealing with young... You know, I've got a daughter. And what about if that was a politician's daughter? You know, you know, it's just we're forgetting these girls are human beings.
So he says, if we're honest, it's the approach to the victims, the credibility issue that caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. There wasn't a lack of understanding. You shied away from the truth.
Yeah, lack of understanding by whom? Lack of understanding by him? Yes. Well, you're in charge.
I mean, there's a lot of commentary this morning.
Yes. There is.
And Maggie Oliver saying, well, who is Jess Phillips' boss? Of course, Jess Phillips says, we don't need an independent inquiry. Who is the boss of Jess Phillips? The answer, Keir Starmer. The real reason she's refusing to investigate the rape gangs is it would lead to the blaming of Keir Starmer. Now, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says ministers supported an inquiry into the Oldham scandal, but it has to be led locally. Interestingly, Kemi Badenoch had tweeted saying, well, Labour really needs to have an independent inquiry. She was basically banged to rights by Twitter saying this is factually incorrect because you didn't call for an independent inquiry. In fact, you turned it down when you were in power, the Conservative Party.
There we are, you see. And that, again, you see, they're forgetting, especially with social media, David. People will talk on social media.
They will.
You know, you've put your head above the parapet by being a politician. And, you know, and I agree with what the caller was saying. She was saying that, you know, they have to be paid. They deserve a wage. We're not disputing that. But what they're doing is they're just covering each other's backs on such an abhorrent story that we should know all the facts, and I can't understand why they haven't got those facts. I'm sure they have, but we're just not being told them.
But also, what have we learned from it?
Yes.
How do we
move forward? Yes, exactly.
Again. It's interesting, actually. This is a good message. The grooming scandal needs an Alan Bates-style ITV drama to move things forward.
That's a very...
It's a very good point,
Very good point, yeah. We do.
Good morning, David. Ian in Somerset, good morning to you. The question of how long has Keir Starmer got, I actually said how much trouble is he in, but anyway, how long has he got, has to be countered with another question. Who on earth is there of any substance to actually replace him? Cheers, great show. Thanks, Ian. Very kind of you. Lots of other messages. I have to be a bit careful about just reading this out. This person says these rape gangs are also running riot in other parts of the United Kingdom. I'm waiting on the scandal here, getting the same information. I think that goes back to Monica's point. I don't think we believe that we're being told the whole truth.
No, I can't see it, you know, because I understand she's come out, hasn't she, and said, no, I don't want a public inquiry, and she's done that, as you've said.
And then she says it's up to the local authority.
And it's up to the local authority. No, it's not up to the local authority.
I would agree. Let's take another voice note. Christopher, good morning to you. Morning.
Good morning, David. Good morning, Monica. First time I've seen Monica.
Oh.
We don't need a public inquiry. We need a royal commission where a judge can command people to turn up in front of them and tell the truth.
Yeah, very good point. I totally agree, actually. And also, we need to expedite it. I don't want an inquiry that lasts many, many years. What we need is we need to know exactly who knew what, when they knew it, and why they didn't tell us.
And very quickly.
And very quickly.
Yes.
Let's also just look at some of your, on a lighter note, just look at your... this is a really interesting story. Daily Star, page 16.
Oh, yes. The taxman blitz on eBayers. Now, obviously, especially at this time of year, everybody's going to be selling things they don't want.
Like the Christmas presents.
Like the Christmas presents, yeah. If I see my Christmas present on there. So, side hustler profits targeted. So, the Gen Z side hustlers could be hit with hefty tax bills from this month. So, hello, welcome to January. So, websites such as eBay, of course, Vintage, all these ones, Etsy, become very, very popular with the young.
Very popular.
Very popular. So, they've been given to the end of January, end of this month, to share seller profits with the lovely HMRC. So online platforms have been required to send HMRC data on users making more than £1,700 or more than 30 transactions since January 2024. That's going to be a bit of a blow for some people, because I should imagine they've made quite a lot more than that. So again, they've got hold of the fact that we're selling things online, and now they want to make it clear that it's not interested. Oh, it's saying they're going to make it clear it's not interested in people selling unwanted Christmas presents, but they're interested in professional online traders who have not reported their profits, but. You can still make a lot of money. That threshold's quite low, isn't it? It's very low. You know, if you think about it, especially with places like Vintage. You know, I've used Vintage.
Have you?
And you get some great things on there.
I bought a car on eBay.
Oh, did you?
No, I really did, yeah.
Oh, was it there? Did you actually get the car? I'm always afraid if you buy something like that.
I mean, it was many years ago. I bought a Jeep, a Suzuki Vitara Jeep, which has done 120,000 kilometres for £3,000.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I'm always a bit afraid when it's something like that, whether it be there. But, you know, hey-ho, people do.
And then very quickly, if we can, Daily Star, page 21.
Oh, yes, this was fine. This was Squill Me In for all you bridge players out there. My mum used to love a game of bridge.
My mum loves a game of bridge.
Yes, exactly. So there's a bid to make bridge sexy to the younger generation. So Adrian Darnell of the English Bridge Union fears the pastime is in danger of dying out. Actually, it probably is, because people do associate it with more wiser, I hate to say it, wiser generation. And he warned it needs a makeover to lure new players in, or otherwise it would disappear. It's a bit like backgammon. I used to play backgammon a lot. I haven't played it for years.
So did I.
But yeah, you see, you need to have it. Yeah, you need to have a game. So bridge, actually, I love playing cards. So we do.
Do you?
I love playing cards.
So bridge is like witchcraft, because I don't understand any of it.
I never played bridge. Sorry, I haven't. No,
I don't understand it.
No, so but it then, you know, but it's a great. It gets kids off their phones. You know, we play card games at Christmas. It's fabulous. We always do. But then my mum and my auntie used to always play cards with me. So you know. It was a very sad childhood.
No, it wasn't. I mean,
I loved it.
My mum has tried to explain the rules of bridge to me, and I just glaze over the whole time. And I try really hard every time I start, and I'm like, no, you've lost me.
Maybe we should try. Maybe we should join the bridge club,
David.
But
and also very social, because you then go round to people's houses, you play bridge.
Yes.
Also, it seems to last hours.
It does. But they have a good old natter, and as you say, get people together. And I'm all for that.
I'm all for that.
Anything to get away from the social media and the phones. Yeah.
Anything to get away from the terrible headlines.
Exactly.
Lots of other messages. Zoe in Lancashire. Good morning, David. Elon Musk had better be careful. Starmer will be calling for his arrest to silence him if he carries on. He'll arrest anyone, was a good point, who sounds a threat. The man needs to step down. He's turned a blind eye on a lot of high-profile cases, and now it's all coming back to haunt him. Lots of you getting in touch about this, also about this other story this morning, because if you can't see a GP or you can't get into A&E, front page of the Daily Telegraph, you'll be thrilled to know. Fast-track NHS care if you're an asylum seeker. That's right. So if you're an asylum seeker, you can rock up to hospital and you're seen within 15 minutes. That seems deeply unfair to me for those people who are waiting hours and hours, and of course the NHS in a state of turmoil. It always is. We're going to be talking about that actually later on this morning. We're going to be talking about the quadruple threat at the moment. COVID, RSV, and so on, and the fact is we got winter flu, which has hit much earlier, actually.
Yes.
This year.
Oh, has it? Well, I mean, but that's been all over the news, hasn't it? All the hospitals
we expect it, but the hospitals are full and you can't get them out. And then, of course, social care and the whole reform has been delayed to 2028. I mean, what's the point of that?
Don't get me started on that one. I mean, that 23 years to do an inquiry. For goodness sake, on something so important.
It's been going on forever, and everyone kicks it into the long grass.
They're just kicking the can down the road.
They are, and that actually is the nub of the NHS's problem, is social care. Thank you, Monica, for the moment. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? That's the big question this morning. How much trouble is Starmer in? The number 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. We'll see you for more headlines after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock on Saturday, January the 4th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you wherever you're waking up. I have great news for you today, as you would expect. It's Weekend Breakfast, of course. Today is World Braille Day, a day to recognise the importance of Braille, which is fundamental to those who are blind, those who are deaf-blind, and those who are visually impaired. Now, today's celebration actually marks the birth of a chap called Louis Braille. He created the system of reading and writing using raised dots. Clever man.
6 dots so I could know the world around me. 6 dots so I could read.
You need a gold medal, Dave. You're really doing a great job. Also, today is World Hypnotism Day, a day that shines a light on the myths and fears about hypnotism. Now, it can actually be very useful in tackling people's fears and also ditching bad habits.
You are now completely asleep.
Am I? Oh, also, it's World Spaghetti Day today. That's right, a day that encourages you to embrace the pasta dish. So, the question this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, do you fancy a carbonara, a bit heavy possibly, or spag bol? You choose. Yum. Oh, no, that's too much. That's just too much. Right, let's move on and start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1890, the Daily Graphic was launched. Yes, that was the first daily illustrated paper. It merged with the Daily Sketch in 1926. On this day in 1957, a dissatisfied plastic surgeon patient was sentenced in London to 10 years imprisonment after he threatened his surgeon with a gun, complaining that his nose was too short. And on this day in 2021, Brian Pinker, aged 82 and from Oxford, became the first person in the world to be given the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine at Oxford's Churchill Hospital. And that is a moment of history. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Oh, the Weekend Breakfast Show with David Bull. It's the best of time.
There we are. That's very jolly, isn't it? 7 o'clock in the morning, Saturday, January the 4th. Monica Price, nutritionist and health and wellbeing expert, joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Oh, what a lovely morning we're having.
Well, a lovely morning we're having.
Yes.
Keir Starmer not having a great morning. Let me just bring you up to speed if you are joining us. Let's look at the front page of the Daily Mail. Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gags. This is Maggie Oliver, former police officer, who has waded in saying that as head of the DPP, he is in serious trouble because he's complicit in what happened and the fact that, as one of our callers said, these are not grooming gangs, these are rape gangs, and we'll talk more about that. And the harrowing detail of these poor girls who went to the police, who weren't believed, they were ignored by the police, they were told to go away. And I'll tell you, and these are very distressing stories indeed. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Meanwhile, he's not just being attacked on this side of the pond. Here we are. This is the front page of the Times. Starmer in Trump's sight. This is Donald Trump saying that the net zero policy in this country is ridiculous and we need to start drilling. He also talks about the fact, and he has said in the past, drill baby drill. He said the British government have made a very big mistake by increasing the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas after an American company announced it would end all production in its British operations by December 2029. Also, we know that Elon Musk has waded in about the grooming gang scandal. He basically has given a broadside to Keir Starmer. And that will focus minds, I think, in number 10. And, of course, Lord Mandelson is still trying to focus on getting trade deals with the United States, and they're worried about the blanket tariffs coming in once Trump is president in 16 days' time. The front page of the weekend, again, very difficult weekend, very difficult reading for the Prime Minister. Starmer faces a growing threat from reform over migration. Now, I wonder why that is, and that leads nicely to the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Fast track NHS care for asylum seekers. Now, that will make you choke on your Rice Krispies this morning. The question I have for you this morning is, how much trouble is he in? I sense Keir Starmer's in a lot of trouble. 6 months in, government has never been so unpopular. What we're seeing is actually Labour voters, tribally Labour voters, deserting the party, saying this is not in my name. How much trouble is he in? 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. Monica Price, how much trouble is he in?
Oh, I think he's in a lot of trouble. I think, you know, when you just go through the headlines, and we've been reading them this morning, you know, the US President-elect and Elon Musk both wading in on our Prime Minister. Now, I was just reflecting on that. If you think about that just for a minute, I can't think of another Prime Minister where that happened, where you've got just a billionaire, multi-billionaire, who's telling us how we run our country, and a president-elect who's not even in power yet telling us how to run our country. So what does that say about who's running our country? Surely Starmer is looking at that thing. If I was in power, I wouldn't like everybody telling me what to do and finding fault in everything I did. So he's got to look at what he's doing and realise that what he is doing, people aren't liking what he's doing.
It was quite interesting. Lots of members of Parliament telling Trump to butt out and Elon Musk to butt out.
Yeah.
I welcome the intervention because it takes people like Musk to put this on the front page to say, what did you know? Why did you cover it up? You were in charge. And Jess Phillips says we don't need an inquiry into this, but it is clear she is protecting Keir Starmer. There is no doubt about that.
Why other reason would she not do the inquiry? She's obviously protecting the party and Keir Starmer. So what conversations have been had? I mean, Keir Starmer will have told her you know, she makes decisions, but they would have had a discussion about it. And, you know, again, there's so many untruths that we don't know. And in a case like this, where we just don't know all the facts, and that's wrong for the poor young girls that were subjected to these appalling attacks and abuse. Exactly.
I mean, I know it's breakfast time and this is very difficult reading, but I've got all of these accounts from young girls who went to the police. So, for example, this particular one, this was a disturbance in 2008 at a Balti House takeaway in Hayward near Rochdale. A teenage girl was screaming and shouting and smashing the counter of the shop. The police arrived. She was then arrested on suspicion of criminal damage, taken into custody. She said she was repeatedly raped by a group of Asian men linked to the takeaway. She provided police with all the evidence, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but including personal effects.
That's right.
Which also, those effects and items of clothing had the DNA of the attackers on them.
And what happened?
Well, nothing.
Now, if you actually just stop there for a moment, nothing. Imagine the daughter, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's sister, that young girl has got a family. If that was my daughter or sister or friend even, you'd be banging on the door saying, look, we've got to get this right. We have to know the truth. And why was she treated like that?
And the one that we were talking about earlier, this 12-year-old girl who went to the police and said she'd been raped and then was told by the police to go away until she wasn't drunk. They told me to go home. There were two men at the door that offered to take me. She went with the pair. The pair did not take her home. They raped her in the car before abandoning her in the street. She was picked up and raped in the house of a man who stopped to give her directions. I mean, she was then picked up by another man who was posing as a taxi driver. I mean, this needs the disinfectant of the cold light of day, and this is why I welcome Maggie Oliver.
Yes,
because she knows what went on.
Yes,
and she is in a very powerful position here.
And she will hopefully get to the truth, and she will hopefully make sure that the truth is uncovered. Because when you think about that poor girl, she was just one of many. Yeah. And, you know, and again, it seems like they just want to push it away and, oh, that's okay, we've dealt with it now. But we haven't dealt with it. And you know, as you say, fantastic that somebody like, Maggie, is standing up and saying, look, this isn't right. We need to do more.
I'm going to take a call now. I just want to tell you what Keir Starmer said in 2012, because it is word salad. And he said, in a number of cases presented to us, particularly in cases involving groups, there's clearly an issue of ethnicity which needs to be understood and addressed. We shouldn't shy away from that as prosecutors. It's the approach to the victims, the credibility issue, that's caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. That is total nonsense. It is a failure of professional responsibility which has stopped you prosecuting.
Yes. As we said, when I read that statement, I mean, I find that statement, again, abhorrent and appalling. I just think that somebody to actually write that down, actually say it and write it down and let that be allowed to be printed to show us. I'm sorry. What does that say about the person in charge? What does that say?
Well, let's talk to Anne, who is in Gwynedd now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I feel not just Starmer, but the whole cabinet should go. They're spending more time looking for solutions than not looking for solutions, they're looking for excuses. With all the experts and advisors, solutions should be in place. Or why are they called experts, and why are we paying the advisors and experts for? And also, what does a public accounts committee achieve?
It's a good question. Generally a good question. Let me just tell you, there's another story this morning. 20 councillors have quit Labour in protest at the party's direction under Starmer. This is Broxtowe Borough Council in Nottinghamshire. Essentially, they say they've abandoned traditional Labour values. I mean, I would agree with that as well. So some of them have been a party member for 42 years. They're also deeply nervous about the centralisation of control. When you look at that, the waging the war on the farmers, the winter fuel allowance, you've got Wed Streeting, telling elderly people, which I think is frankly patronising, to put the heating on, even if they haven't got the money to do that. And Age Concern very worried about how older people are going to cope, particularly today as we're seeing cold snaps and snow blanketing the country. How much trouble is Starmer in?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Anne.
I think he's terrible, and I am very, very suspicious of him. I really am. And regarding the grooming, how about the Women's Institute getting involved? There's got to be more people objecting, because it's awful. There's young girls all over the place that can't walk the streets, going to work, well, they don't go out, do they?
No.
Honestly, I think it is the saddest thing. I've got daughters. You know, we all worry. I would like MPs, lady MPs, to walk the streets on their own of certain areas.
Yeah. And just in terms of that, do you have any faith that we're being told the truth?
No.
No, I would agree with you.
No.
Anne, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks ever so much. Very powerful indeed. Isn't that awful?
Isn't that just awful?
When people say they don't have faith.
Yeah, no faith. I mean, that's just awful. And this man's only been in power for 6 months. 6 months. And already, most of your callers and the messages we're getting is, they're agreeing with what we're discussing this morning, that he is in trouble and they haven't got faith in him anymore. And that, 6 months in, David, that's appalling.
It is appalling. Let's just turn. There's another big story this morning. This is the front page of The Eye. Starmer faces growing threat from reform over migration. And this links to another story here, the Daily Telegraph. Fast-track NHS care for asylum seekers. That's right. If you're an asylum seeker, you'll be seen within 15 minutes in the NHS. But if you are a British taxpayer, you have to wait some 24 hours. So clearly some very bizarre priorities going on. And then there's been this MRP poll, which is very salutary reading indeed for the Labour Party. They would actually plummet to 278. Nigel Farage's reform would scoop 120 seats at the election. So the question I'm asking this morning, 6 months in, not exactly a great start. Keir Starmer trying to reset with the new year. He's going to deliver a speech on Monday about the NHS. How much trouble is he in? The number 0344 499 1000. Let's take another voice note now. Mark has left a voice note. This is about Elon Musk getting involved in UK politics. Good morning.
Morning, David. It's Mark in Lancashire. It's strange how all the people who are complaining about Elon Musk meddling in UK politics and UK affairs seem to be okay with anybody in Brussels similarly meddling. They love it when Guy Verhofstadt criticises our way of life or our politics or our government, but as soon as Musk says anything, they're up in arms. Funny that, isn't it? Just saying.
Funny that, absolutely. So that, yes, you're right, of course.
Saying.
And that's interesting. Starmer is trying to reset the relationship with the EU, which basically means undoing Brexit as much as he possibly can, and cozying up to Europe. Now, that Europe is a declining market. The Franco-German axis is in serious trouble.
It is.
I would be trying to double down on my efforts with the United States.
I would. I absolutely would. You know, and there's a reason for him to do it. Obviously, he is getting himself involved. I must admit, I was a little bit shocked at first by how much Elon Musk was getting involved, because everything we seem to do now, he has a comment or some kind of video, or he puts out a tweet, you know, to tell us what his views are. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that, because he's from his point of view, it's just a person's point of view, and we're all entitled to a point of view. And I think that, but the thing is, he makes some very good statements. That's the thing, and I think that's where Labour and the Starmer government, they just, because he does make some very good statements, they don't know quite what to do with it.
No.
That's the problem, I think.
OK, Matt and Derby, good morning to you. Great show. Thanks very much. Good morning, David. You said you welcome the Trump and Musk interventions in our politics. Now, in 2016, Nigel Farage said President Obama had, quote, behaved disgracefully by making comments and taking a side in the Brexit referendum. Was Mr Farage wrong to say that? I know you hate hypocrisy in politics because you always tell us. I think Nigel was right at the time, because this was a matter of constitutional importance to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
But I stand by, I'm obviously not Nigel Farage, and Nigel and I do disagree on certain matters. It's a great point, though.
Yeah, it is a good point. Again, you see, isn't it great that, you know, we're sparking debate this morning? You know, it's getting people thinking about how this country is being run and what we need to do to make it better.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to talk about these things, because they can't just be left to just go to, you know, by the government. They certainly can't be left for this government, because they're not doing what they should do. You know, well, they're a government. They're meant to look after us. They're meant to protect us. They're meant to make sure that the policies and procedures that they put in place will benefit the people, especially the Labour Party, because that's their whole ethos, is to support, you know, the person who's the underdog almost.
Kemi Badenoch, of course, has come out fighting against Keir Starmer and calling for a public inquiry. Now, she was then given a community notice by X to say, well, the Conservative Party was in government and they turned down an independent inquiry. After the break, Nigel Farage has actually responded to Kemi Badenoch. We'll tell you his response after this break.
nonsense.
It really is. And there's
the whole thing, she's trying to create something and then turn it into something that it isn't. She's sort of very strange.
She's in a cooking show,
We're not in the pursuit of perfection. We're in the pursuit of joy.
Yeah, joy.
I mean, it's so...
Surely she should just admit it. She's in the pursuit of money, isn't she? Isn't that what she's up in pursuit of?
Yeah, she's after Gwyneth Paltrow's place, who makes much of money from what she does.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 723, Weekend Breakfast, Saturday, January the 4th. I'm joined by Monica Price, nutritionist and health and wellbeing expert. Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you being good? Have you got some New Year's resolutions, health and fitness?
I had to just shy away that tin of Quality Street, as one does. I've eaten a lot of chocolate.
Do you know I had one of those, like a nose bag?
I know. The thing is, you just can't stop. That's the problem with them. You open that tin, which is not a tin anymore, it's a plastic tub.
Yeah.
Not very nice.
No, there's quite a good one. It unfolded like a flower.
Oh,
did you get one of those?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I got the, and yeah, so I ate a lot of chocolate.
Did
but
you?
the thing is, I always say, a little bit of everything does you good.
Yeah, a little bit of what you fancy,
A little bit of what you fancy does you good. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, it's just to get back on track, really. If we can.
I tell you, the other thing that I seem to trough was mince pies.
Oh no, I was. Do you know what my guilty pleasure was after eights. I just couldn't stop eating them. It was just ridiculous. It was just take them away.
The other thing, of course, was the Christmas tipple.
Oh well.
Which turned into multiple tipples. And anyway.
No, well, I don't have such a problem with that because I don't drink. So
you are so
I know,
good,
I'm so
aren't
sorry.
you?
I haven't drunk for years.
Now, we were talking earlier on about the mess that Starmer is in. I'm asking this morning how much trouble is Keir Starmer in. The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. Front page of The Independent this morning. Well, it's called The Eye now. Starmer faces growing threat from reform over migration. Keir Starmer, according to the copy, must show he has a grip on immigration if he's going to avoid hemorrhaging voters to Reform UK by the next election. So this is fascinating. We've now know former Conservative MP Marco Longhi has defected to Reform UK, saying his decision is about restoring our national identity. Now, also, Kemi Badenoch waded in. This is about the rape gang, saying there needs to be a public inquiry. She was then given a community notice on X to say the Conservative Party actually failed to have a public inquiry. In fact, they voted against having a public inquiry. So she's been community noted. Now, last night, Nigel Farage was speaking at the first of Reform's regional conferences. This was in Leicester last night. He took a series of swipes at the Conservative leader, pouring fuel on the fire of this dispute. He took a series of sort of jabs at Badenoch's misspelling, her ranting conspiracy theories. We spoke about this. The Reform ticker, the number of people who actually were becoming members of Reform UK. If you remember, Kemi Badenoch said, oh, it's an automated counter. And then, of course, the press were invited in to understand that it came from Nation Builder, which is a particular piece of software. So when you sign up, the number went up because you can see the donations coming in at the same time, the membership fees coming in at the same time. So she got that terribly wrong. I wonder what your thought is on this. Nigel Farage says he's not going to sue her, but what he is going to do is he's going to make her seat, North West Essex, a huge target for Reform UK.
Wow, that's a statement. You see, now he's obviously, you know, he's an whether you like Nigel Farage or not, he's an intelligent man, and he's very black and white. So he says what he says, and he stands by what he says.
He does.
So if he's done that rather than go down the legal route, he's obviously thinking that is the better thing for him to do, because in the long run, obviously he wants more voters for the Reform Party. So and also she probably won't be expecting that. She probably won't be expecting that.
Is she out of her depth?
Well, do you know, I really had good feelings about her when she came into power. You know, she was saying all the right things, and again now it seems she's got herself into such a ditch that every day she says something, you think, oh no, why have you said that? You know, and I just, again, where are the advisors? Isn't anybody advising these people?
Well, yes.
But if that's the case, well, they need to be sacked as well, because they're not doing a very good job.
No, and so this also comes on the back of a big MRP poll, which is a huge poll actually, carried out by Stonehaven. This, again, sobering reading for the Labour Party. They go from, they will drop, according to this poll, to 278 seats. That means they lose 133 members of Parliament. I should imagine there are some people who are fresh on those benches that will be very frightened. The Tories go up 36 seats to 157. Reform, the big winner here, up 115 seats to 120, currently with 5 members of Parliament. And obviously Nigel Farage riding high, feeling sort of very ebullient.
Yes, and I think he is. Again, I think it's because he's standing up for the people. He's talking a language that the people understand. And I think, you know, at the moment, the Labour Party have got it very wrong, and the Conservative Party aren't doing very well either. So of course, where are people going to turn? They want to see action. You know, they want to see Britain get back to where we were. And at the moment, who's doing that? Well, nobody at the moment.
What do you make of these 20 councillors quitting Labour in a protest? These are stalwart Labour councillors.
And also, how long have they been in post? I don't know who they are. And
well, some of them have been party members for 42 years.
Yeah, I mean, what does that say? What does that say, David? That says that for 42 years I've supported the Labour policies and I've supported the Labour Party, given probably a lot of my life if they've been in that for 42 years, suddenly thinking, you know what, this isn't working. So that's if I was Starmer, I'd be very worried about that. I'd be very worried about that poll. Even I was surprised at how many people have, you know, have gone to the Reform Party. And it's because I think we haven't got a leader. You know, on either, Keir Starmer's not turned out to be a leader, you know, and, you know, the leader of the Conservative Party is not turning out to be a leader. People want to see a leader. They want someone who they can look up to and think they're actually going to listen to what's being said, you know, and listen. The whole idea of being a politician, you're around the country as a local MP, you listen to your constituents and you take on board what they say and then you take it to Parliament. Simplifying it, that's how people would probably, the average person would think about what a politician does. And of course, everybody's views and comments is not always going to be heard, but still, a good politician will make them feel like they're being heard.
There is a real sense, isn't there, that the government just has its fingers in its ears, and whenever people say, we are deeply nervous about where you're going, all I hear is 20 billion whole, blah, 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 fix the foundations, blah, 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 farmers, winter fuel allowance, and then I hear about the triple lock.
Yeah.
So I just hear the same response. Yes. And then everyone just zones out.
And that's the problem, you see, and that's a real worry. You know, think about the young people. We need young people to go into politics. So think about, you know, all the new Labour politicians, for example. I mean, they must have been so excited. I remember watching, you know, the news, Sky News, all of them. They were all sort of, really excited. Of course they were. You know, they've just become in power and they're going into the House of Commons, they're going into Parliament. How exciting for someone who wants to be in politics. Look at them now, though.
Yeah.
You know, but what message does that send, David, to anybody, the young generation, that actually want to be a politician? You know, I mean, it's one of those things you think, do you really want to be a politician?
And also, you're right about being a constituency member of Parliament.
It's really
your first job is to look after your constituents.
Look after the constituents. They seem to have forgotten that.
But there's also something else playing out now, which is that you've got Labour MPs in farmland, in really rural farming communities, who are very worried about the imposition of obviously inheritance tax for farmers.
Yes.
And then what it means for them in terms of their own vote.
Yes, well, this is it. And then you see, but they're not standing up for what they believe in. So many of the Labour politicians, just an overview, look at what they're doing. They're new in post. So it's like being, you've like the new headmistress or a new headmaster.
Yeah.
They're thinking, oh, I've got to do whatever he tells me to do, otherwise I'm out of a job.
That's right, and the whips will be having a field day.
Exactly. So I can see why they're doing it, but that's not a good politician. In my view, a politician should be somebody who actually listens to their constituents and support the area they're in. I live in a rural area, so I would like to think that the politician that's in my constituency is looking after me and my constituency. It's not.
No. And I also live in the country, and I can tell you the depth of anger from farmers.
It's huge.
And also, it goes back to a much bigger issue for me, which is that the metropolitan elite have no idea what farmers do in terms of the countryside management.
A week on the farm.
I'd like to see Keir Starmer mucking out pigs.
A week on the farm to know, it's 24. Don't forget, most farmers, they don't have holidays. They don't take breaks.
You can't, and also
they work
in
365 days of the year.
Yeah.
And they draw. And the most accidents happen with if people think it's construction. It's not. It's farming. It's
right?
Agriculture. Yes. Unfortunately, it's deaths and entanglement where they get, too early for breakfast.
Breakfast.
But it's appalling what he's done to the farmers. They are the mainstay. They make our food.
Well, not only that, in a very unstable world, you need food security.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, you've got this complete nutter, Ed Miliband, who wants to stick solar panels on agricultural farmland. None of it makes any sense.
They don't understand it. What they should do, the Farmers Union, which I'm a huge supporter of, and I follow them on social media, and of course they've been battering this out and saying, we need to sign a petition, which I've signed, and, to say this has all got to be scrapped. It's not going to be scrapped, David. We know it's not going to be scrapped. But we have to protest against it because it's just not right. Simply, that is just not right. Show me the, if you like, how the thought process of how they got to this, and they can't.
Well, you're assuming there was some thinking.
Yeah, well, maybe there wasn't.
Lots of messages coming in. Good morning, David. I love your show. Thank you very much. This is Michelle in Altrincham. Good morning to you. Isn't Starmer supposed to be talking on the 6th of January, that's Monday, about the poll which was run in 2024 with over 3 million people, including myself, who voted to get him out? Let's see if he does mention it. Let's see. Also, Mr. Glenn Stewart Westerman, Glenn in Leeds. Good morning to you. Dr. David, is this the same Labour Party that from 2016 to 2020 criticised the Trump administration, posted nasty tweets, calling him a racist, a crook, and flew a baby Trump blimp over the Capitol? Ooh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yes.
The reverse is in place. Labour now in power, and apparently Musk and Trump's comments undermine democracy. I'll tell you what that means. This government is rattled. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? How much trouble is the Labour Party in? 0344 499 1000. I mean, however you look at this, it's pretty impressive to be this unpopular in 6 months.
Well, it is, isn't it? And your poll says it all. The fact that people are leaving within the first 6 months, I mean, it really is an unprecedented attack on the Labour government. Whether or not you support Labour or not, the facts speak for themselves. People are leaving their party. So what does that say? He has to take stock and have a look and see what he's doing.
Tell us what that says. Right, still to come after the break, we'll be discussing some big health stories. Obviously, I've got Monica here, who'll probably tell me off about my diet. No. Also, we're going to be talking about long-term care being delayed until 2028, social care, which actually is the nub of the problem, because if you don't have social care, then you can't get anyone out of hospital, therefore you can't get anyone into hospital, and that then has an impact on general practice. But the government seems to be kicking that into the long grass. We're going to be talking about the pay of managers in the NHS. Guess what? It has soared. And we'll be talking about something which you may be very interested in. Prosecco teeth. Oh. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
You're on fire this morning. Good morning, 7:38, Saturday, January the 4th. David Bull here, Monica Price, joining me this morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. Nigel Brown, good morning to you. It should be easy for Starmer. 33% voted for him on his manifesto. Now he needs to go back to it or risk wiping Labour off the face of the political map. That would be a shame, wouldn't it? That's not my words. That's Nigel's. Thanks very much for that. I'm sorry to say this, Monica, but the government is not protecting us, the British people, one bit.
Well, yes, I would agree
well, yes.
at the moment. Yes,
yeah.
Well, yes,
well,
it
yes.
is. I agree. I agree.
Leslie in Suffolk. David, a BBC television drama, Three Girls, was made in 2017. It told the powerful story of sex trafficking in Rochdale. The BBC should show it again. Everyone knew. Outrageous. That's a good... I wonder if you can get that on iPlayer.
I was just about to ask that.
Well, have a look. Can we look that up? Can we see if we can get that on iPlayer?
Yeah,
it's called Three Girls, and it was transmitted when in 2017. Oh, another one on this. Chantal Gould, good morning to you. Good morning, Dave. The BBC have an ITV-style programme on the grooming gangs called Three Girls. Lots of you getting in touch. After watching, it sadly opened my eyes to what is going on. It made my blood boil. Keep those messages coming in. Good morning, David, Chris. Oh, it is on iPlayer, apparently.
Oh, fantastic.
So we all need to watch that. So it is on iPlayer. Good morning, David. Fast-track NHS treatment for asylum seekers. I thought we were supposed to be discouraging them from coming here. This is just another pull factor. Yes, it is. You're right. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. How much trouble is Starmer in? Let's talk about this. You know, I hoped, finally, a government might grasp the issue of social care.
Yes.
And proposals on the long-term funding of adult social care in England are likely to be delivered in 2028. I'll be dead by the time these proposals come out.
It's too long, David. I mean, for goodness sake, 3 years. You know, OK, then we need to do... OK, if they need to do some kind of, you know, inquiry or an independent commission, whatever they want to call it, it doesn't need to take 3 years. You know, if you go into a hospital, and as we were discussing during the break, when you go into hospital, you can't leave hospital if you're elderly or you're not able to cope by living alone, or if you live alone, for example. You have to have a care package in place.
You do.
Now that doesn't seem to happen, and I know because unfortunately my brother was in hospital and he's been in hospital a few times, and you can't leave until a care package is in place. My friends have had the same thing, and it's so frustrating because then that leaves the beds not free, so we can't free up any beds. So the whole system is broken down.
But let's you know, you say 6 years, but actually when you look back, the Dilnot inquiry was in 2011. It actually established the cap on individual care costs. Do you remember all of that?
Yes, I do remember.
It wasn't implemented. I don't know why it wasn't implemented, but it's the thing that we don't talk about. And actually, there have to be some clever incentives here. So in some ways, you know, look, if you then care for your elderly relative and they live with you, why can't we give you a tax break on the back of that?
Absolutely.
And that keeps you out of the publicly funded social care. There has to be a way to keep families together. We also know that older people do much better when they have intellectual stimulation.
They do, and we know that. And Age UK did it. I'm sure they did a survey on that, and that the survey said, surprise, surprise, that, you know, keep elder age pensioners in their homes because it's a sense of familiarity for them. You know, when you taking somebody who's a little bit older out of their home for whatever reason, 9 times out of 10, David, they won't want to leave it. No. They're only doing it because they're forced to, because either they're mentally okay but their body's just not good, or both, or the other way around. And that's it's so wrong. We do not treat our elderly with any kind of respect that I think we should. I just don't know, and we should. You know, other countries get this right. Scandinavian countries get this right. Yeah. You know, Germany, Italy, France, they're much, much better at looking after their elderly. They have so many free things for free, you know, which our pensioners have to pay for. You know, they have so many incentives and they look after them. And some one of your callers was talking about the veterans. You know, well, that's another area where we just seem to forget. These are people who've served for our country to make sure that we have a vote, to make sure that we can talk as we're talking today, openly and freely.
Do you know, one of the other things that I thought was a brilliant scheme was when they buddied up an older person and a young person.
Oh, that was so
yeah,
good.
Brilliant.
And they took early years and childcare services, so they paired up with the early years, and then they took the young children into the elderly care.
I thought it was lovely.
Fantastic. See, why don't we? They're good. Some homes still do that. Some
do they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and they take all sorts of animals in, which is fantastic. See, my sister, I know this from personal experience. My sister is a really good carer. Okay, and good morning, Jan, if she's watching.
Good morning.
And you know, she's been doing it for years, and she wouldn't do anything else. Her hours are ridiculous.
The pay's terrible.
Yeah, and the pay is terrible. She works from 7 till 7, often doing double shifts because people have gone sick. But she does it, David, because she cares about what she does, and she wouldn't do anything else. And if it wasn't for people like her, who just, a bit like our nurses really, who just could not think about doing anything else, I don't know where we would be.
I agree.
You know.
Just before the break, this is a big story.
Oh, yes.
A huge story.
Oh, what's this?
Dentists hate one thing more than any other alcoholic drink, and that is Prosecco.
Really?
Now, I personally think Prosecco is disgusting, but that's just...
I don't drink it, obviously.
No, you don't
yes.
drink. But the reason, apparently, is because it has a very high sugar content, and it's also extremely acidic, and apparently it can rip through your tooth enamel, leading to discoloration, and severe discoloration at that. Apparently, this is called Prosecco teeth.
See, I never knew that.
No,
until
I
I saw
didn't
that.
know that.
Until I saw that story, I'd never even know that existed. But what I do know is that there's more people being admitted into hospital for dental treatment now than ever
that's
before.
a very good... But you see, so I suppose what we're saying is if you're going to imbibe in Prosecco, and actually there are Proseccos and Proseccos, and some of them aren't as sweet as others.
Yes.
So you've got this triple whammy. You've got carbonation, the sweetness, the acidity of it.
Yeah.
So I suppose what you're meant to do is have a sip of that and some water.
Yes, and then really brush your teeth. Go and brush your teeth, which people don't, of course. You know.
But isn't that apparently?
But that's quite surprising. I didn't know that.
Wait for this.
Oh, and there's another.
No, Brits apparently we drink 131 million bottles of Prosecco every year. Yeah.
Champagne is the best.
Well,
practically zero calories.
Well, I'm obviously going to fiercely defend Brexit and say actually English sparkling wine is the best.
That's right.
But yeah, 131 million bottles of Prosecco every year, which seems an awful lot. I mean, there again, don't look at my shopping basket. I agree, by the way, about champagne. I'll tell you why.
Yes.
It's drier.
It is. It's drier, and there's 0 calories. 0 calories. It's the best one to have.
0 calories?
Yeah, almost 0 calories in a glass of champagne.
Count me in.
There we are.
Should we have some champagne?
Let's go for it.
OK, Monica, I think our time has come to an end, actually.
No, it's no.
Well, I know. I thought you were here till 8, but anyway. You are still here till 8?
Yes, I'm here till 8.
Normally, are you interested in sport?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, well, all right. I'll keep you for 15 minutes then.
That's fine.
Keep all your messages coming in, please. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? How much trouble is the Labour government in? Just six months. Amazing. 6 months into a new premiership. Also, still to come, we have all our sporting roundup this morning. We're going to be talking about teenage dart sensation Luke Littler winning the big £500,000 prize, winning the World's Darts Championship. That all took place last night at Alexandra Palace. What a man, what a man. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning to you.
nonsense.
It really is. And there's
the whole thing, she's trying to create something and then turn it into something that it isn't. She's sort of very
she's in a cooking show,
We're not in the pursuit of perfection. We're in the pursuit of joy.
Yeah, joy.
I mean, it's so...
Surely she should just admit it. She's in the pursuit of money, isn't she? Isn't that what she's up in pursuit of?
Yeah, she's after Gwyneth Paltrow's place, who makes much of money from what she does.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 750. Lots of messages coming in. I'm afraid it really doesn't matter how much trouble Starmer is in. Nothing will happen to him. He'll step down. He'll be pushed out. He'll then get paid loads for giving talks. Andy in Cleethorpes, good morning. Happy New Year, David. What amazes me is this government can find the money for everything that the majority of British people don't want, but they can't find the money for the majority of things that British people do want. Also, Tony Tucker, one of our regulars from Barrow-in-Furness, good morning to you. NHS priority for migrants, that's right. So this is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Fast-track NHS care for asylum seekers. He goes on to say, where is that? They also receive free taxis from Barrow-in-Furness to Preston Hospital in return fares. Tony, thank you for that. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. How much trouble is Starmer in? 0344 499 1000. Front page of the Daily Mirror this morning. Nice littler earner. What's that about, I wonder? Nick Ellaby, Talk Sports correspondent, joins me this morning. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning. What a night.
What a night.
What a Christmas. You know, there's nothing better. This is obviously snowballed in the last few years because the way Barry Hearn, the promoter, has promoted the darts and given it that atmosphere at Ali Pali with 10,000 quite drunk people, let's be honest.
So there is booze there, is there?
Yes, exactly. So if you watch back you might remember sort of Eric Bristow and players like that in the 90s, right? If you watch those games, they were rowdy, but they're nothing compared to the atmosphere at the moment. And you know, that's part of it. It's built up, and now we've also got this kind of the Pele of darts. This 17-year-old sensation, Luke Littler.
Well, how many people are at Ali Pali watching this?
It's just over 10,000. There are actually. The thing is, it sells out in minutes.
But hang on a minute. If you're at the back, what can you actually see?
Well, there are big screens as well. Yeah, right. Obviously. And you can feel the atmosphere as well, smell that booze, and I imagine probably quite a lot of farts as well.
Oh no! And the sticky,
it's part of it, though,
and the sticky carpet, and
yeah. People have been thrown out for drinking too much. I saw a guy dressed as a cow getting thrown out in a video yesterday. In the quarter-final between Luke Littler and Nathan Aspinall, Nathan Aspinall actually stopped throwing to turn around and watch a guy down a 4-pint pitcher of beer. No. That bloke got thrown out as well. Obviously, drink responsibly, but you know, when the nights are long and it's cold, you know, we have that. Maybe we have this sort of ancient passion for a kind of a winter festival, and that's what it's all about.
You know, all the Nordic nations, all the Northern European nations are joined in that lust for booze.
And the darts as well. Iceland, darts is massive in Iceland. Yeah, huge. It's one of the biggest sports here.
I don't know why I knew that. That was just a random...
Have you been watching, Monica?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I think it's really exciting.
Do you play darts in a pub?
Do you know, I used to when I was younger. See, that's what we had. Don't forget, we didn't have phones. There was no social media. So what did you do? You used to go to the pub and play darts and play pool.
But I used to play darts in the pub when I was a lot younger.
Well, Luke Littler was definitely inspiring the next generation. There's already a 13-year-old who's playing, you know, looking like he might be potentially as good. Last year, I went to see when Luke Littler, as a 16-year-old, reached the final for the first time. We went up to St Helens for Talk to speak to his St Helens Darts Academy friends, and there are kids there who are too small to even get their own darts out of the board. So they're throwing at the board and they have to put a chair in front of the board to go and retrieve their own darts. And they've all got their own darts shirts, their own nicknames. So the culture is really strong. And it's just this tournament that has got bigger and bigger, and every Christmas now we all gather around and watch it. It's been fantastic. And as they say in the Mirror, he could tip to earn £50 million over his career, but he's got £500,000 for winning the PDC World Championship last night, and he intends to celebrate by ordering some takeaway and playing on his PlayStation.
Well, he's got to keep his physique up, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the appeal as well, because these guys they seem like ordinary blokes that you can still probably meet in a pub somewhere. Although Luke Littler's still too young to drink, he's 17, and also he's the only player at the PDC World Championship this time who didn't have the tournament sponsor on his shirt, because it's Paddy Power, a betting company. He's 17. He's not allowed to actually have the tournament sponsor on his shirt, but he will next year when he comes back.
And so what's next for him then?
More darts. I mean, more takeaways and more darts, to be honest. Like, he won 10 events in the last 12 months. It's only his first year a bit, you know, on the professional tour. He's earned something like £1 million. The top earner, and then the world #1, Luke Humphries, who won last year, has earned £2 million. So you see this sort of growing as a career option, which also, you know, as well as the kids being inspired, parents will be able to say, well, actually, there's money in it, and then maybe give kids a bit more time to practice their darts.
And so my understanding is that also, when I was growing up, Bullseye was a big thing, the television programme. I understand that he's being eyed up?
Yeah, so they had a Christmas special with Freddie Flintoff, the former cricketer and coach at the moment, as the presenter, and Luke Littler was the main star. That had about 7 million viewers.
Wow,
ITV put it back on at Christmas.
Great.
It was one of the biggest watched programmes on ITVX.
I'm going to say that's a lot of people watching
A huge amount, and that was just a one-off. So they've got a new series coming. There's a big deal from ITV for Luke Littler, so that'll add to his earning potential.
More takeaway.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're struggling to convince Freddie Flintoff to be the presenter full-time, because he's actually coaching young England cricketers at the moment.
I'll do it.
Well, put your name in the hat.
Yeah. Well, if I get booze and takeaway, I'm in.
We've got a dartboard round the corner at TalkSport. If you want to come and have a few chucks, I'll show you.
David, we'll have a game.
You can apply for the job.
Oh, excellent, excellent. By the way, as they say, Nick, you can't beat a bitter bully.
Exactly.
Yes.
I hope the prizes improve this time.
Well, so do I. What? They were terrible, weren't they?
It was like cutlery set and washing machine, and then a jet ski sometimes.
Yes. A Hoover.
Holiday to Egypt, I remember. That's pretty good, actually.
What was the worst prize?
I think it was like the cutlery set. I remember, like, that's the cutlery set.
Cutlery. It's cutlery.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it was Dusty Bin on 3, 2, 1. That was my favourite one. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think that might be before my time.
Yeah, it was a dustbin. You won a dustbin.
Yes.
Anyway, Nick, thank you very much. Always
Useful.
good to see you.
Cheers,
Let's
you
play
too.
darts in the break.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Nick Ellerby there, TalkSport correspondent, talking about Luke Littler. £500,000. Well done, him. Yeah, I didn't see you down as a darts player.
No, you see, I'm a woman of many talents.
You are?
You know, when I used to, it was because when I was a teenager, again, there was no social media, there wasn't anything, so we used to go down the pub, play pool and play darts.
Love that.
Actually, I used to love it. and now I'm going to go and have a throw at the darts board.
Well, you should. So seriously.
I'm going to.
Well, they've also got a boxing machine. I was quite good at that.
Oh, there we are, you see.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you know what? It's good for the kids. How fantastic that 17-year-old is going to inspire so many young children. And that's good.
That is very true.
Yeah.
Apparently, David, darts capacity at Ali Pali is 3,200. We've been several times. The atmosphere is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
The fans are an amazing bunch. Never any trouble. You must go. Thanks, Phil. I'm in. Look, if there's beer and takeaway, I'm in.
Very true. Very rarely you hear of any trouble. Nick will probably say the same at a darts match.
I think that's great. And actually, he's right about... I mean, when I woke up this morning, it was pitch black, and also it gets dark so early. So we are desperate for that kind of stuff. Lots of messages coming in. Keep all of these coming in. Graham says, I live in Beeston, a town in the Broxtowe area, talking about the defection of all those Labour councillors. Although I didn't vote Labour, the local Labour councillors were exceptionally passionate about our area and only want the best for us. It's very sad to lose those council representatives, but I completely agree as to why they've left their position. This cretinous government must remember we are people, we are not just numbers. I think they're in serious trouble. That's the question I'm asking this morning. How much trouble is Keir Starmer in? How can he actually afford a reset? On Monday, he's going to be talking about the state of the NHS and what they plan to do about it. The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Monica, our time is now over.
It is over now.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, David. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And
Thank
what's your one New Year's goal?
My one New Year's goal is to take up something new. Do something new. Learn a new language, I think. I'm going to I'm going to learn a new language.
Do you know which one?
I'd like to speak Italian. So I'm going to try. So next time I come to you, we'll do it in Italian.
And of course, Gabriella,
of course, Gabriella
is Italian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes, I'll speak to Gabriella.
That's why she's a bit, you know. Monica, thank you ever so much. Really good to see you. And Happy New Year
Thank you to you too as well.
After the break, we're going to be talking about the state of our health service. We're going to be talking about hospital flu cases rising at a very concerning rate, much earlier than normal in the year. We're also going to be talking about the quademic and the number of patients in hospital and hospitals not being able to cope.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Just after 8 o'clock. Oh, look, it's got light behind me. Good morning. 8 o'clock, just after 8 o'clock, Saturday, January the 4th. I hope you're very well. David Bull here. Weekend breakfast. Thanks ever so much for your company this morning. As you would expect, it's the weekend. I have great news for you. Today is World Braille Day. That's right, a day to recognise the importance of Braille, which obviously is fundamental to those who are blind or deaf-blind and those people who are visually impaired. Actually, today's celebration marks the birth of a chap called Louis Braille. He created the system of reading and writing using raised dots. How clever.
To learn the numbers in Braille, we use the first 10 letters of the alphabet.
Right, it's also World Hypnotism Day today, a day that shines a light on the myths and fears around hypnotism. It can actually be very useful in tackling people's fears and ditching bad habits, of which I have many.
I want you to close your eyes.
Okay.
And now your mind is starting to think.
Your mind is empty, David. It's also World Spaghetti Day today, a day that encourages you to embrace this pasta dish. So the question at 8 o'clock in the morning is, what do you fancy? Do you fancy a carbonara? A bit creamy for my liking. A spag bol? I'm going to go over my shirt. Yeah, you choose. Thank you. Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Some new ones for you. On this day in 1967, Donald Campbell, 46-year-old son of Sir Malcolm Campbell, died in his attempt to break his own water speed record. This is on Coniston Water in the Lake District. His boat, which was Bluebird K7, somersaulted at high speed and he died instantly. On this day in 1972, Rose Heilbronn became Britain's first woman judge at the Old Bailey. Her career included many firsts for a woman. She was the first woman to win a scholarship to Gray's Inn. She was the first woman to be appointed King's Counsel in England, the first to lead in a murder case, the first woman recorder, the first woman judge to sit at the Old Bailey, and the first woman treasurer at Gray's Inn. Wow, that is some accolade. And on this, crikey, I remember this so vividly, on this day in 2021, do you remember this? Scottish Member of Parliament, Margaret Ferrier. She was arrested. She was charged by the police after she admitted using public transport in September whilst infected with COVID-19. She admitted travelling to London, attending debates in the Commons despite taking the COVID-19 test. Then she was told her test was positive, and then she travelled home by train from London via Glasgow, and then later acknowledged visiting several businesses in her Rutherglen constituency on the day that she took her test. That reminds me just how crazy and authoritarian the world was in the dark days of COVID-19, and those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, we're feeling so fine. With David Bull's wisdom and pressing the line. Jeans making magic, a twist on our day.
I never know what's happening. Never know what's coming next on this programme. No. Good morning. 6 minutes past 8. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bull. Thank you for all your messages. Let's just say that Keir Starmer won't be having a good morning, I think it is fair to say. We've been talking about the grooming gangs this morning, as many of you like to say, and I think this is right, the rape gangs, and the truth about that. Who knew what, when? And Keir Starmer, as DPP, what did he know, and why was there so much obfuscation around this subject? What do we now know? What don't we know? Who knew what? When did they know it? And why was nothing done about it? Now, Maggie Oliver, who was a former police officer, has waded in this morning, front page of the Daily Mail, Starmer guilty as anyone over the grooming gangs, saying that he was complicit, paraphrasing here, but was complicit in what went on. The Times also talks about Starmer, a very different story this morning, but this is about Trump wading in, saying that our net zero policy in this country is absolute madness. Drill, baby, drill. Do you remember? That's what Trump talks about. Elon Musk also talking about the grooming gangs as well. So Elon Musk wading in as well. He basically intensified his criticism yesterday after, of course, Labour rejected the calls for the public inquiry into the grooming gangs. Strong words. He said Starmer was complicit in the rape of Britain. There's also another story which Starmer will choke on this morning. Starmer faces growing threat from reform over migrant poll. And also, there's another story this morning, a front page of the Telegraph. Fast-track NHS care. Yeah, that's right, you can't see a doctor unless you're an asylum seeker, in which case you can see one in 15 minutes. And that is why people are so exercised about the state of immigration, legal and illegal, into this country. I will just tell you about this MRP poll. It is has been carried out by Stonehaven. It shows Labour loses 133 MPs, taking them down to 278. Conservatives gain 36 MPs, taking them to 157. Reform gains a walloping 115 members of Parliament, taking them to 120. And that brings me to the question I'm asking this morning, which is, how much trouble do you think Keir Starmer is in? I tend to think he's in quite a lot of trouble over this. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. I'm really keen to talk more about these grooming gangs, these rape gangs, the travesty, the stories. Reading about a 13-year-old girl who went to the police saying she'd been raped, and then the police told her that actually she should come back when she wasn't drunk. She was then serially raped. I mean, these are just appalling cases, and I want to know why nothing was done about it, why we weren't told the truth about what was going on. And of course, Keir Starmer and his response at the time is less than accurate, I would say. I have other stronger words for that as well. Lots of you getting in contact about that as well. I know that we've got Greg in Edinburgh waiting on the line as well. Are you there, Greg?
Yes, good morning, David.
Good morning, Greg. Your thoughts this morning?
Well, you can't be other than so angry at this. And you know, the wonderful Maggie Oliver, she's just so right. This, our establishment is rotten to the core. It really is. I mean, I'm an ex-police officer, and in my day, you know, if you fail to investigate an offence, especially something as horrendous and serious as these offences, at the very least, it was neglect of duty, you know?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that this is worse. This is like the post office scandal, you know, when people knew that people were innocent, and to protect their reputations and to protect their political agenda, they allowed people to go to prison and to kill themselves. This is the complete opposite. This, to me, is a criminal conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. And people need to end up in jail for this. They really do.
And in terms of Jess Phillips saying we don't need a public inquiry, many people, including Elon Musk, saying essentially that she's protecting Keir Starmer.
Well, you know, the thing about that is that so worrying is that I would have no confidence that any branch of our establishment is trustworthy enough to investigate this. I really, you know, whether it's a judge or a politician or a retired politician or a senior police officer, they're all in it together. They're all covering each other's backs. They're all following the same agenda. The only thing I would feel confident is if they got a team in from abroad, another country to come in and to look into it.
You mentioned Maggie Oliver here. Her intervention this morning is very significant, I think. How much does this increase the pressure on Keir Starmer? I also just want to say, in terms of his response, this was in 2012. He talked an absolute load of mumbo-jumbo word salad. He said, in a number of cases presented to us, particularly in cases involving groups, there's clearly an issue of ethnicity that needs to be understood and addressed. As prosecutors, we shouldn't shy away from that. But if we're honest, it's the approach to the victims, the credibility issue that's caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. That is just totally unacceptable.
Well, not only is it unacceptable, it's utter rubbish.
It is rubbish.
For decades now, politicians have been prioritising the importance and the understanding of offences against women and children, and they know the priority and the issues around the investigation of these offences. And for him to say is we need to understand. They've understood now for decades the issues surrounding this.
How about taking action?
Exactly. I mean, to even compare Maggie Oliver and Keir Starmer, Maggie Oliver resigned. She was a whistleblower. She knew the facts and she acted so honourably at the time and resigned and told the truth. And Keir Starmer is a liar and he's covering his back. He's looking after his political interests, not the interests of these young women and these girls, and he's just despicable.
And how much trouble is he in?
He's not in any trouble, is he? He's not in any trouble. He's got 5 years. He'll be there for 5 years. nothing will happen. There'll be a lot of hoo-ha, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the post office scandal, because that's exactly the same thing that's happened here.
Yeah.
There's been such serious consequences, and people needed for the post office scandal to be in prison, and people need to be in prison over this, but nothing will happen. As I say, the establishment is rotten to the core, and they'll cover up their backs, and eventually it'll be swept under the carpet. They'll say all they need to say, but I'm just so disgusted by this and by these individuals.
I think we all are, actually. Really good to talk to you, Greg. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to phone this morning. That's Greg in Edinburgh. Let's move on, shall we, and talk about health concerns, because the number of patients in hospital with flu has quadrupled in the last month. This is according to NHS England. 5,074 patients with flu in hospital. This was on Sunday last week, up from 1,190. So a five-fold increase, really. They're saying quadruple. It's actually more than that. 4,469 patients averaging in a hospital with flu every day. Now, just in terms of that, it means that the flu season has arrived early, but also we're seeing this quademic in the NHS. The NHS always struggles at this time of year. It seems to be happening much earlier. And of course, we know that Keir Starmer is going to make some sort of speech on Monday about the state of the NHS and his plan for the NHS. Joining me now is Dr. Anise Esmail, who's an Emeritus Professor of Family Medicine and General Practice at the University of Manchester. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Really good to talk to you. I mean, look, we expect flu every single year. For many of us, particularly if you're young, it's a self-limiting illness. It's not very nice to have, high fever. You feel pretty dreadful. But there are real concerns about elderly people, those people who are vulnerable, chronic conditions, and those people are hospitalised. And also the hospital's just simply under so much strain.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's a recurring problem every year, every winter. We get this. And I think this is why there's a huge campaign that starts in September to get people to have their flu vaccination. And that's the best preventative that we know, really. So really, it's still not too late to have your flu vaccination. And you can get them in so many different places, pharmacies, GP surgeries, and you should go and get one.
So I know that people will push back on that, because I think the COVID-19 vaccine has alienated a lot of people from getting vaccinations. What would you say to that?
No, I think you're right. It has, unfortunately, because of the way that people were forced to take the COVID vaccine. It has made people very against it. But the influenza vaccine has been around for years. Every year it is modified and changes. And it does offer protection. And it's very sad, because many people said at the time that it was wrong to compel people to take vaccines. Now, this is entirely voluntary. And elderly people who are vulnerable, can have it, and in fact anyone can have it, but there's a group that have to pay for it. But it's not expensive, and they should get it done.
And of course, this comes on top of this quademic. So we've got flu, COVID-19 is still around, and obviously there are those people who are suffering from that. We've also got RSV, norovirus. Do you just want to say a bit about those?
Well, they're both infectious viruses. Again, because they're viruses, things like antibiotics don't help. I mean, norovirus is self-limiting. You feel pretty miserable with it, but you get over it very quickly. And then RSV is respiratory syncytial virus, which actually is a respiratory virus that affects a lot of young kids, but again, self-limiting. But unfortunately, people with some ongoing conditions and so on, if they get it, they become very ill with it. But it's there. But again, there are now vaccines available for this. So I think it's very sad, because it is a time when the NHS is under huge pressure, and then you have all these cases, and then there are other areas like the difficulty people have getting GP appointments and so on. So people end up going to casualty, and many often get admitted. So it's really very difficult for the NHS at the moment. I accept that.
It certainly is. Also, just that the sheer numbers of people. There's another story. More than 1 million patients in England were unable to contact their GP at all. throughout December. 2.2 million people had to wait several days to get hold of their doctor. 1.1 million failed completely. Even when they got an appointment, fewer than half actually received a face-to-face meeting. 100,000 people told to manage it themselves. There is a real crisis, isn't there, in primary care?
Well, yes, and I think, I mean, we always talk about crisis, but this has been brewing for many, many years. You know, it's not happened in the last 4 weeks. This is tens of years, I would say, probably 15 years of underinvestment in primary care. And it's really important because in the NHS, primary care is the linchpin of the NHS in a way. And if primary care fails, then the whole system fails.
So can I just ask you about that? Because
yes.
GPs are independent contractors, aren't they? And,
yes, they are, yes.
And they're paid on a capitation basis. So i.e., the ideal scenario for a GP is to have tons of people who are well and young.
Yes. Well, it's more complicated than that, but yes, capitation is a big part of the payment of GPs. Not all GPs. I mean, I worked in a social enterprise, so we were salaried, so it wasn't the case. But that is the main model. And yes, but at the same time, you know, you can't pick and select who you want to have, really. And the reality is the GP is a community resource, and people go to their GP to register so they can get help locally, and that's how it should be. The problem has been, though, because of the underinvestment, because GPs are private contractors, and if money's cut back, then they can't have the resources to employ more GPs or other staff like practice nurses and nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So you know, this is a real problem, and I think that the government recognises this, and I think there has, you know, they've talked about it from day one that they're going to refocus the NHS more towards primary care and away from hospital. But of course, this is going to take time to get in place. But I think there is an understanding where the problem is, and sadly, we've got a very severe winter. We've got this, you know, pandemic, and obviously the point is that if you can't see your GP when you have flu-like symptoms and you want reassurance and you might even need some treatment, the best place to get it is your GP surgery. And because you can't, people turn up in A&E and then they see a junior doctor frequently who needs more support and help, and it's not unusual that people get admitted once they get there. Whereas if they're seen by their GP knows them. GP has lots of resources that they can put in place. You know, we have nurses, we have other people who can visit them, and you know, we can bring in place social services and so on. So there's a lot that can be done in the community that can avoid hospital admission. And hospitals are not very safe places, actually. It's a very common place. You go in without something, and you frequently can get a chest infection in hospital itself because of the environment. So you know, it's much better to be able to see your GP, to get treatment, and to stay at home when you have these, if obviously you're able to stay at home.
And obviously, I mean, there is a huge crisis in social care. We know that report won't now come out till 2028, which I think is far too late. But Keir Starmer are going to make some sort of statement on Monday about GPs. My understanding is the reforms they're going to put forward will mean that GPs can essentially circumvent a consultant. This is my understanding of what's coming. Would you welcome that, so that GPs become a much better gatekeeper? Because my friends who are GPs all say the bureaucracy is off the scale at the moment.
No, you're right. And you know, I've been a GP. I've now just retired, but I was a GP for over 30 years in the NHS. And I would say that, you know, I was able to do a lot more even 10 years ago. And things have improved. I mean, you know, we have better access to things like MRI scans, but there's a lot more tests that could be made available. And, you know, GPs are expert generalists, you know. I would say that probably 90% of what people have can be dealt with and managed in general practice. And that's why you need the resource there, because that prevents people going to hospital. You've got to have good systems, you've got to have trained staff. And then if you can get to see your GP, and the point is that because of COVID, and it happened in our practice, we are able to give a lot more advice on the phone. We have better systems. And many people welcome that. You know, you don't always have to see a GP. And in GP practices now, there's a lot more staff. We have nurse practitioners, physician assistants, we have mental health workers, we have physiotherapists. So it's changing hugely. And people can see a wide range of people in order to get help with their condition. And that's always a positive thing.
Excuse me, I think the kicking social care into the long grass until 2028 is a huge problem. Also, is general practice still something that junior doctors want to go into?
Well, it's increasing. I mean, I think there was a period, again, because there was lack of investment, people looked at general practice as they were graduating, saying, I'm not going to go in there, it's just problematic, you know, not enough funding and so on. But actually in the last 3 or 4 years, things have begun to shift. And we see this, that there's many more people choosing to do general practice as their first choice. When I graduated in 1982, it was the most popular specialty, and I would love to see it back there again, because it is a really fulfilling career, and it's a great career for a doctor. And I think that with the right reforms in place and the right investment, it will be the best profession, really.
Fantastic to talk to you. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to talk to me. That's Dr. Anees Esmail, Emeritus Professor of Family Medicine and General Practice at the University of Manchester. Lots more still to come. We have our head-to-head this morning. Joining me will be Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator. Letis Bromovsky also joins him, who's a journalist at the Mail Online. That's all coming up.
Like fraud or counter-terrorism, but the public never see that. So what really matters to the public are things like shoplifting, so-called signal crimes, things like burglary, robbery, car theft, car windows being smashed in. That's how people perceive whether they are safe or not. And I think if you look at the numbers, in fact, on things like shoplifting, it's slightly different, but overall crime actually has gone down. But what people perceive is that they are more unsafe than ever.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Talk 8:27 Saturday. Oh, 8:27 already. 8:27 Saturday, January the 4th. Just ruminating on that. So many messages. How much trouble is in Keir Starmer in talking about this on Monday? He's giving a speech. The Guardian. Starmer attempts new reset with plans to cut NHS waits. Also this morning, fast-track NHS care for an asylum seeker. So, yes, that's right, you can't see a GP unless you're an asylum seeker, and then you can see a GP within 15 minutes. Isn't that good? Then, this huge story this morning, Daily Mail, Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. This is Maggie Oliver, the former police officer who's come out fighting, saying Starmer is complicit, and I am paraphrasing. Meanwhile, he's also being attacked by Elon Musk and Donald Trump, president-elect, who becomes president in, 16 days' time. Starmer in a lot of trouble, I would suggest. 0344 499 1000. We were just talking about the NHS as well. This is Sean in Warwickshire. Great show as always. Thank you ever so much. My clinic on Thursday had 24 patients in the morning and 80% were coughs and colds. I was having to add appointments to my list to cope with the demand. It's the most I've ever had. Most of them were viral. Some did require antibiotics after a respiratory assessment. Sean, thanks very much for that. Talking about the problems facing the NHS this winter. Flu much earlier. Also, as we heard earlier, that Dr. Anise Esmail saying if you are at high risk, do get a flu jab, please. It's not too late. But of course, we were also talking about how COVID-19, the vaccine, and forcing people to have that vaccine has put people off generally. Keep all these messages coming in. Sharon says, I think the NHS needs to be privatised. Now it's used and abused by everyone except the people that are paying for it. Good morning, David. One more. Paul Barrett says he's in Christchurch. I totally agree with the gentleman from Edinburgh. Starmer is in no trouble at all. He has a huge majority in Parliament and is so brazen. He will continue to destroy the UK for the next 4.5 years. Well, let's find out, shall we? It's time for Head to Head. Head to Head. Well, joining me this morning, Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator with a splendid hat on, and Letters Bromovsky, journalist at the Mail Online. Good morning. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, well, it kind of all merged.
Christmas. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Christmas till the 6th of January, at least.
Yes, so it's 12th night tomorrow. Yeah. So I've got to take the tree down.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with the tree either. Where does one take the tree?
Oh, well, it depends if one has a real tree or not a real tree.
I got a real tree.
You can recycle them.
Oh, well, then I'll be doing that.
I think you'll find the local councils take trees.
I've got to look into that because I can't be having the bad luck that comes after that.
Well, quite. Talking of bad luck, shall we just look at those headlines this morning? I mean, honestly, Starmer being attacked from all sides. So we've got Elon Musk jumping in. We've got Donald Trump coming in saying net zero is an absolute nonsense, 2030. Drill, baby, drill. Elon Musk says Starmer was complicit in the rape of Britain. Maggie Oliver now as well coming into this and talking about the grooming gangs, these rape gangs. Maybe I'll start there, actually. How much trouble is he in?
It really depends on how quickly he's going to implement the recommendations of the J Review that landed on the government's desks only 3 years ago now, nearly 3 years ago. The three key recommendations for that: mandatory reporting, new child protection agency, and a national redress scheme. Nearly 3 years later, none of these have been implemented yet.
Why?
There is a Children and Wellbeing Bill before Parliament. If the government doesn't put these amendments down, I blame the Senate government for not acting quickly enough on this. If this bill isn't amended to bring these recommendations in, those key three at least, on Monday, then the government really is in trouble, I would say, on this issue.
And just in terms of that, I mean, this has taken... I mean, many of our listeners and viewers are absolutely horrified, as am I, as to what happened.
Yeah.
And the level of dishonesty, I think, is the right word to use. And reading these horrific stories of 13-year-old girls who went to the police, said this is what had happened to them, weren't believed, were told to go away until they weren't drunk, then they were raped again on the in the car on the way home. And I don't understand how, A, that's been allowed to happen in this country, but also what went on. And when you look at Keir Starmer's response, this is in 2012, and I know I keep going on about it, but just in terms of his response, it's word salad. We shouldn't shy away from it. It's an approach to the victims, the credibility issue that caused these cases not to be prosecuted in the past. There was a lack of understanding. No, there wasn't. There wasn't a lack of understanding. There was a lack of due diligence.
And I think that's why people are so outraged by this, so up in arms, is that there was failings across almost every institution that should have been there to protect these very young, very vulnerable girls, and yet they were failed time and time and again. And I think that's why there's even more outrage now that when calling for the public inquiry, Jess Phillips has said, no, we're not going to do this. It should be down to a local level.
So that's really interesting. The fact is it died down, didn't it? And
it died down.
And Jess Phillips, who has said there won't be a public inquiry, then you've got Elon Musk saying she's covering for her boss.
Now,
go on.
I was going to say, in terms of Elon Musk getting involved in this, on the whole, I largely think it's unhelpful for him to be getting involved on X, writing things that are, you know, very sort of, well, not quite slanderous, but they're very out there, they're rude, almost a smear campaign and attacking these people. I think that it's sort of a sign of what we're going to see in the future from America constantly getting involved in British politics. And as you said on the front page of the Times, again with Trump attacking the windfall tax rises that we've got in this country as well. You've sort of got to remember as well that Trump back in 2017 lost an appeal up in Scotland on his golf course to not have these wind farms near his golf course or in view. So he's also got a bit of a personal vendetta going on.
Take the windmills down.
So of course he's going to be, you know, shouting out against this.
Just in terms of Jess Phillips and saying there shouldn't be a public inquiry, all the fingers are essentially saying you are covering for your boss. I think what the public want is they want answers. Who knew what? When did they know it? Why was nothing done about it? And what can we learn from it? And that's what they want now.
Look, a cathartic exercise to bring stuff to light in lieu of these horrible crimes is entirely understandable. The government is still on the hook for the previous inquiry and implementing those recommendations. I don't want to see another inquiry. No. We saw on Friday and the Social Care Commission kicking reform for that into the long grass. I'm getting sick to death of Labour commissioning reviews, inquiries, independent assessments
what
of
about
things
the Royal Commission?
As well. No, Royal Commissions are the ultimate kick into the long grass. What we need is for them to look at what's on the desk in front of them, the stuff that the Senate government pledged it would legislate on. Let's look at, for example, at the Child Protection Agency. Letters is entirely right that the bodies involved in that are not up to scratch. The CQC is undergoing its own assessment at the moment. We need extra measures to protect children now, not another 7 years down the line. That is what the victims need to give them justice. If there are further failings that Keir Starmer had, why has it taken this long for them to come out as well? It certainly is not the job of Elon Musk to expose these. It's the job of the British government to legislate for them now.
In some ways, I welcome the sunlight on this because I do think we need to know exactly what was going on. But also the fact that in 2012 he gave that word salad statement. I think it's coming back to bite him.
Well, he's Prime Minister now, and the buck stops with him. In 2012, he was in charge of the prosecutions of those 95 men that were sent to prison. Those men that were sent to prison for a total of 95 years for those horrible crimes. Now he's in charge of ensuring the criminal justice system in this country effectively delivers redress. And even those 3 recommendations out of the 20, the key ones that were there, national redress, child protection agency, mandatory reporting, have not been implemented. Labour has this huge majority. For God's sake, use it. Implement, legislate for these measures on Monday. Get those amendments down, the Child and Wellbeing Bill.
Well said, well said. We'll pause for the moment. We'll be back with more head-to-head in just a few short minutes.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Weekend Breakfast, 8:38. We're in the middle of head-to-head with Mike Indian and Lettuce Bromovsky talking about Starmer. How much trouble is he in? Let me know your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. So we've talked about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. The fact is you've talked about the fact that he needs to implement those findings. I actually think he needs to come out and publicly address all of this. And, of course, you've talked about Donald Trump and Peter Mandelson, of course, trying to stop any tariffs being levied on this country. So he's got lots of problems. But closer to home, 20 councillors have quit Labour in protest at the party's direction under Keir Starmer. This is Broxtowe Borough Council in Nottinghamshire claim the party has abandoned traditional Labour values. This is Milan Radulovic. He's been a member for 42 years. They're establishing a new independent party. So the reason for this is they question the winter fuel payment, which you would have thought is a traditional Labour value. And, of course, that was their first policy, to remove that. This is not a good look for Labour at all.
No, and it sort of speaks to the wider problems that we've been discussing today, this sort of disillusionment that's been going on within the Labour parties. Polls have recently been showing their drop in popularity, a lack of trust to run the economy. And on the winter fuel payment, it was very shocking when it came out. It wasn't part of the manifesto pledge that they originally were putting in when they were running the general election. It sort of came out of nowhere. And now we've seen the sort of shock knock-on effects of it this winter, when people have really been struggling to pay their bills, coupled it with the energy price cap which came into place. So energy bills were rising. Again, people are just struggling out there, and the oldest people to be hit the hardest at such tough time. It's a very bad look. In terms of PR-wise and communications-wise, it's not a good image.
But it looks like it's a very uncaring government.
Yeah.
Fine, let elderly people die.
And when they were looking at it, they were clearly just looking at the numbers and where they could save money, and they thought, oh, this will be easy, we can save a couple million here. But it's had disastrous effects on them, and I'm surprised they haven't wheeled it back in some way, but they've stood strong with it through these months, and now again they're losing councillors because of it. They're losing their 42-year loyalist Labour votes.
It really is quite something.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
For councillors to go. Just into, we've talked about the winter fuel allowance to death, but then you've got Wes Streeting in a really crass interview saying now is the time to turn the heating on. We've heard from lots of older people who are so frightened that they can't actually afford to put the heating on. They may have missed out on the winter fuel payment by, a few pounds or whatever because of the threshold. We're seeing people who are coming into A&E with burns because they're sitting next to a 1-bar electric fire because they're so cold. And for Wes Streeting to say turn the heating on, it's not that straightforward.
If the government's best communicator is dropping a clanger like that at the crunch point, then you know that their comm strategy is in trouble here. But this is going to be the proof is in the pudding for this policy, because when the figures come out for deaths due to cold, and particularly for the elderly people for this winter, you can't sit here and defend this policy when the temperatures outside are as they are. It was very poorly communicated. It was poorly thought out in that way. I think actually in terms of the actual outsized influence of it as well, they could have done something probably far more reaching and probably far less damaging to the government and people's lives.
But Lettuce's point is actually valid. It's the optics of this more than anything. Fine. OK, there are older people who don't need the 300 quid, but actually it's the optics.
I think at the moment we need to focus on the practicalities, that there will be people listening to this who know somebody who doesn't feel they can put their heating on. And that is, at the moment, what's first and foremost in my mind at this point in time. The amount of money saved from this was paltry. I think in terms of, they could justify it in the public finances that they've done something bigger on welfare spending than just this. This feels like an unnecessary totem, but it wasn't explained in pitch roll. They've made their bed on this a long time ago. They'll have to deal with it for the rest of the year, probably for the rest of this Parliament in some way, shape or form.
Mike mentions advisors. I do wonder who's advising them, because, of course, they frankly have lied to the electorate on multiple occasions, and people voted for Labour based on a set of promises which they haven't fulfilled.
No, exactly. And they really haven't. There have been so many little missteps they've gone back on, whether that's with the WASPy Women, a policy that they very much supported outright publicly on Twitter.
Photo shoots saying we support the WASPy Women.
And then going back on it. It's a very bad look for them. I think in some ways, and actually it's very easy when you're out of power to agree with these policies that you don't actually then have to implement. But I think there should be some repercussions for all governments, that is, for all parties. You cannot go around misleading.
How would you do that? Would you make it legally binding? So your manifesto becomes a contract?
Or you give out fines to parties who go back, or something like that, you know, some sort of policy that will make people think twice about simply saying things so you can look like the good person and not the villain.
OK, well, it's just interesting, and I know Mike will have some very strong opinions on this. Let's look at the MRP poll. This has been carried out by Stonehaven. I know we're miles away from an election before you tell me that. Labour down 133 members of Parliament to 278. Conservatives up 36 to 157. Reform up 115 to 120 members of Parliament. Lib Dems at 47. Down, that's quite interesting. Down 25. Your reading?
I think it's fascinating, but also not that surprising. When we look back at the general election, the way that Labour won was not through being inspired by their policies. It was through a love lost for the Conservative Party. People just wanted them out, and so people voted for Labour. So now, really, those voters, they're not loyal to Labour, and they're looking for what might be the next best option. And for some people, now that is to be seen as reform. But also, when you look at where reform came second across these constituencies, there was 98 constituencies they came second in. 89 of them were won by Labour, and often those majorities weren't that massive. So it wouldn't take that much to really push it over the edge and give it to the second place, which in many cases is reform.
Mike.
Reform polled second place in 100 seats across the country, both Labour and Tory, particularly for Labour in the red wall seats as well. Those majorities have been successively falling since 2017. 2019 they were down, 2024 they were also down as well. What this really depends on also, what this doesn't factor in, is how reform organises itself as a national but also a local force in the next 4 to 5 years. Because the reason the Lib Dems did so well on an equivalent share of the vote is that their local campaign ground game is just much better than the other parties.
But they're much older. Yeah, I see,
also so if reform could... So, yes, if Elon Musk makes this much wanted donation to reform, I think if they put it into...
Do you believe he would give cash?
I don't know, but I think...
I do. I really do.
But you also need councillors on the ground, you also need activists on the ground, and you need to know where you can win, because we saw this in previous elections with UKIP in 2015, with the last election with Reform. They were capped by the fact that their support was nationally spread but not locally concentrated. The Lib Dems showed them how to win those seats. So this also depends on party organisation as well.
OK, we'll come back to that. We're in the middle of our head-to-head. We'll continue with this in a few short minutes.
let's make it very clear, 96.5% of all sex abuse cases in Britain go unprosecuted by the CPS. That means they never see their day in court. My cases, along with thousands of other little girls in Telford, Rochdale, Rotherham, Oldham, Banbury, countless towns and cities across the UK, never had their day in court and never saw their abusers brought to justice, whether by Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs in the 80s or Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs in the 2010s or 2020s.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 8:48 Weekend Breakfast in the middle of head-to-head with Mike Indian, fresh from his honeymoon. Also, Lettuce Bromovsky as well. Congratulations.
Thank you. My wife will be thrilled with the mention.
Yes. Well, did you have a lovely honeymoon?
We did, yes, thank you. Good. It was very nice.
And where were you?
Japan and South Korea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, very nice.
Oh, well, welcome back and congratulations. Just very quickly, I just want to talk about Kemi Badenoch. I mean, it was interesting that she talked about the grooming gangs, or as we're now calling them, the rape gangs. She said that Labour needs to call this public inquiry, and then she got a community notice from Twitter because she was basically pulled up by Twitter and saying the Conservative government turned down a public inquiry. I just think, oh, crikes, that's embarrassing. And the other point, the reason I'm bringing that up, I've remembered now why I'm bringing that up, because Nigel Farage last night said he is going to target, we were talking about targeting seats, he's going to target North West Essex, which is her seat.
Yeah. Look, I don't know what the next election will bring. I think it's probably the nearest parallel for it is probably the 1923 election, when there was a huge political realignment that saw Labour move through. The issue with Kemi Badenoch is, at the moment, this feeds back into Musk and Trump and reform, is that her lack of positions is basically opened up a bit of a vacuum on the political right in this country as well. And the Conservatives haven't managed to draw in voters. Now, she's only been there for a couple of months. The issue is that she's not really looking back at her own government's record here. She was in the Senate cabinet when they turned down the inquiry. The J recommendations weren't implemented fully weren't implemented at all under their watch, partly due to the fact the election was called so early as well. She really needs to spend this year firming up her vision, or she won't be leader of the opposition in 2 years' time, maybe even 12 months' time as well. So she has to really think carefully how she positions herself and not be so easy to make mistakes.
I mean, so that's a brilliant point. She needs to fact-check.
Yeah. That should be a bare minimum, though. Like, it's funny that we're even having that as a conversation coming up. You know, you should know what you were doing when you were in government anyway. So the fact she said that is embarrassing.
Can I just ask you very quickly about net zero? This inflames our viewers and listeners. They get very cross about this, but that you'll be thrilled to know this morning there's going to be a net zero nudge unit, because of course no one wants a heat pump because they're rubbish, but no one wants them, so they're going to use. Do you remember this behavioural insights team? They used it to great effect in COVID-19, frightening everyone to death to say that you need to have vaccines and so on. But the net zero nudge unit will be set up essentially because Ed Miliband wants to scrap noise restrictions on heat pumps. He wants to lift the limit on their size as well, so that you can put bigger ones in that are much noisier. And of course, he's desperate to get to net zero by 2030. That goes against what Donald Trump says, and trying to abandon all of that. But I just think we're being manipulated every single day by the quangos.
Well, I mean, whether people will be manipulated by this or not was yet to be seen, kind of thing. But I'm not sure that this is necessarily the best use of money.
No.
Again, these heat pumps, there just hasn't been an uptick in them. And actually, in the article, it was saying, there was a great statistic that I've got right here. It was saying that only 14,000 heat pumps have been taken up from February to March of last year. And in the same time, 1.4 million new gas boilers have been installed.
And you know, they wanted 600,000 heat pumps.
Exactly.
So they're miles off.
The uptick just isn't there, and it simply really comes down to the cost of them. Even though they're being subsidised by the government, originally it was £5,000, up now to £7,500. £3,500 subsidy, they still cost around £12,000 to install. So it's still more expensive than a gas boiler, which is coming in at £2,000 or £4,000. Realistically, I think what is a better way to handle this is by insulating homes. You can reduce the amount of heat that's being used, save on the gas emissions, help your net zero just by insulating homes. There's around 10 million homes in the UK which aren't insulated.
Yeah, I mean, also, I live in the country. It's pretty impossible to insulate my house because it's a very old house. But just in terms of that, listen to the electric. They're forcing electric cars on people. No one wants to buy those. They're having to discount them. Now we've got the behavioural insight team saying, oh, you need a heat pump. Well, people say, well, I don't really want a heat pump. Who's leading who?
Oh, fuel poverty remains one of this country's most shameful endemic issues as well. And you've highlighted the issue perfectly there, particularly for those that live in rural areas too. The issue, for example, is they want to get rid of log burners, for example, too, which seems
I love my log burner.
I mean, look, we need to think about, if we're going to phase out North Sea oil and gas production as well and maintain the energy security part of Ed Miliband's remit too, how are we going to heat our homes? Are we going to be using methods, for example, heat pumps? Are we going to be using heat drawn from the electricity generation network? There has to be some holistic thinking going on here, and we can't just rely on gimmicks. Insulation is very much part of that. It's not glamorous, but it's very important to do. But fundamentally, what people want is they want cheaper bills in 5 years' time and a guaranteed security.
And they keep saying we're going to have cheaper bills, which obviously isn't happening. Shall we just talk about Meghan Markle, my favourite person on the planet? We have a clip. You'll be delighted to know that Meghan Markle is back in public life, because I was very worried I hadn't heard from her for ages. Let's take a look, because Meghan Markle essentially has appeared. We'll show you that clip in just a second, but just in terms of Meghan Markle, let me just tell you what this story is. She's got a new series on Netflix. This is The Duchess of Sussex. How has she still got that title? But anyway, that's another thing. She revealed in an Instagram post that she'll be working with a streaming platform again for a reality show called With Love Meghan. With Love Meghan. Let's have a look at a clip.
I'm going to share some little tips and tricks. I see what color I gravitate to, and everything goes from there. And how you can incorporate these practices every day. That's what you want. You want that shape and texture. Come on. This is about connecting with friends. I love that we're doing this together for the first time. Making new friends. That is so good.
We're family now.
And just learning. Look at how much honey we have.
Do you believe in love?
Right. Meghan says this is on Netflix, says it's the genre of lifestyle programming, blending practical how-tos, a candid conversation with friends new and old. Meghan shares personal tips and tricks, embracing playfulness over perfection, and highlights how easily it is to create beauty, even in the unexpected. She and her guests roll up their sleeves in the kitchen, garden and beyond, and invite you to do this. I'd like to roll up my sleeves and tell her what I think of her.
It's very American,
isn't it?
I'm not sure it's going to play very well with the British public here. But the whole, it's super sort of sickly sweet in the giggling and the laughing. But to a more sort of serious point for Meghan on this has got to work for her, because realistically, when you look back at the year, her $100 million Netflix deal, this is sort of the last attempt, and all the other things have really quite flopped, whether it was the Polo Netflix documentary, which, got very, very poor reviews, whether it was her Archetypes podcast, which was actually cancelled this year. There have been so many things that haven't worked out, and if Netflix cancel their deal with them this year, it's going to be quite embarrassing.
Now, Mike, I imagine you'll be gripped to this.
Personally, I'm hoping for a sub-documentary about Meghan Markle's beekeeping skills as well.
Oh, that's a great
I just want to watch. I want to watch a live program just of Meghan Markle trying to look after bees. That would just grip. That's a series I would watch.
Would you?
That's like, is this cake?
Have they got the? Lettuce is right. This is
last chance.
It is a last chance, I think, from Netflix. But also, they thought this would have universal appeal. Look, there are people who say, and I have read some of the comments saying, oh my God, I totally love her, all that kind of stuff. But there are lots of people, I really don't care.
Well, it's not aimed at us, is it? It's aimed at the Americans have an insatiable appetite for the life of the British royals, even the ones that are on the periphery as well. And this is the thing about, we talked about Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Meghan Markle. These people are divisive and they cause controversy in their various spheres, and that's what part of their appeal, and that's how you grab attention in today's multimedia platform world.
It's interesting. Someone said the reality show goes against previous claims she's made about wanting to remain private. I just don't get Meghan Markle, dude. She's all like, no, the paparazzi are the worst, they invade my privacy, and then she does a reality show about her family
in someone else's
friends.
house.
Yeah, well, that's true as well.
Yeah, it's not her house, it's someone else's house.
Sort of
Do you think she made that? Did she make that? Did she actually cook that?
The cooked food, well, that would be quite a story if it came out as that. But it's also this new image of her is now more of like a trad wife kind of image. Moving on from her other ones, we've had Meghan the Royal and Meghan all of this, but now she's sort of the trad wife who seems in this perfect, harmonised,
which is quite aggressive, isn't it? Because she's cooking and cleaning.
Well, it's definitely a change. And also, there have been a lot of people saying that the trailer for this come out at a bit of a tone-deaf moment when America's been going through all these times with New Orleans and all these different change of political power, and she's releasing this to sort of show her perfect happy life.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Lovely to see both of you. Mike Indian, political journalist and commentator, Lettis Promovsky, journalist at the Mail Online. That was today's Head-to-Head.
Head-to-Head.
Well, keep all your messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, how much trouble is Keir Starmer in? The big headline this morning, the Daily Mail, Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. This is Maggie Oliver, former police officer, who has waded into this with a very brave account, calling out the Prime Minister, saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's complicit in this. And we've had some really emotive calls this morning as well about what went on. Who knew what? What did they know? When did they know it? Why was nothing done about it? And this utter nonsense from Starmer about which I've called word salad when he was actually talking about this in 2012. So I want your thoughts on all of that, please. I'm delighted to say that Maggie Oliver will be joining me after the break. That's going to happen straight after the break to tell us her side of this story. I think this is incredibly brave, actually, and I'm very much looking forward to talking to Maggie after this break. We'll also have the latest weather and travel for you as well, and Denya's Delights. That's all still to come. Don't go anywhere. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 9 o'clock now on Saturday, January the 4th. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bull. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, as you would expect, it's the weekend, so I have great news for you. It's World Braille Day today. That's right. It's a day to recognise the importance of Braille, which is fundamental to those who are blind, deaf-blind, and those people who are visually impaired. And actually, today's celebration marks the birth of a chap called Louis Braille. He created the system of reading and writing using raised dots. That's very
Sing
clever.
the Braille alphabet song. A.
Very nice. Also, today is World Hypnotism Day. It's a day that shines a light on the myths and the fears about hypnotism. It actually can be very useful in tackling people's fears and also ditching bad habits.
When I snap my fingers, you will transform into a famous historian.
Oh, good. And it's World Spaghetti Day today, a day that encourages you to embrace this pasta dish. So the question is, what do you fancy? A carbonara? A nice spag bowl? You let me know your thoughts on that. Yeah. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts. On this day in 1642, under the orders of King Charles I, armed soldiers entered Parliament. The English Civil War started shortly afterwards. On this day in 1938, Bertram Mills's circus became the first circus to be shown on television. This was also the first time that a paying audience for any event had been televised, and the audience were then informed they could request seats out of the range of cameras. Now, the circus was originally from Paddington in London. In fact, the circus became famous in Britain for its Christmas shows at Olympia in West London, and his troupe were the last to perform with live animals on the Drury Lane Theatre stage. And on this day in 2017, the last ABC cinema closed its doors. The Bournemouth Cinema, this opened in 1937, only kept its name by a quirk of positioning in the town. The final film that it screened, the answer to that? Back to the Future. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings, we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Hello, very good morning to you. Weekend breakfast at 9 o'clock, Saturday, January the 4th. I should think Keir Starmer is not having a great morning. This is the year of the reset, of course, another reset of the Labour government. I think it's fair to say he's had a pretty miserable 6 months, and now he's under pressure both domestically but internationally as well. The front page of the Times this morning, Starmer in Trump's sight, Donald Trump wading in to the row here. So he basically says it's a very big mistake to impose the windfalls tax on North Sea oil and gas. Elon Musk also jumping in here, criticising Keir Starmer for not allowing a public inquiry into the child grooming gangs, or as many of you have been ringing up and calling them, rape gangs. Starmer attempts this new reset. This is The Guardian. This is a big speech he's going to make on Monday, talking about the NHS. And you'll be delighted to know you can't see a doctor, but you can if you're an asylum seeker. That's right, they can see a doctor within 15 minutes. But for me, the headline that is the most important headline this morning is the Daily Mail, and I'll show you that now. Starmer guilty as anyone over grooming gangs. This is Maggie Oliver, who is an amazing campaigner. She has spoken out this morning and says Keir Starmer is as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs. Maggie Oliver, a former detective, this was her claim last night. And obviously there's been this enormous pressure for the government to deliver a public inquiry. And Maggie Oliver says she has no faith in the Prime Minister's desire to get to know the truth. just in terms of this, I think many of us this morning want to know, what exactly did they know? When did they know it? Why was nothing done about it? Were they tiptoeing around issues of ethnicity and race? And how did they manage to let down so many young people in these barbaric crimes that were affected? And joining me now, I'm delighted to say, is Maggie Oliver, former detective constable at the Greater Manchester Police. Good morning to you, Maggie.
Good morning, David.
Can I just start by saying I just think you're incredibly brave, and what you have said is so welcome. Just talk us through what made you sort of put your head on the block here.
Because I have to. You know, this has been my life now. This topic has haunted me since I first became aware of what we call grooming gangs, but I think rape gangs is a better description. In 2005, when I first learned about this horrific crime and how it has destroyed thousands and thousands of children's lives, I was horrified that nothing was being done. I worked on a case that was closed down by Greater Manchester Police. The official reason being because they would not put resources in. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now, 20 years ago, I was extremely naive. I am not naive anymore. This is my subject, and I know it, David, inside out. So when I said that yesterday, it's because I feel a great responsibility to speak out for the many who have been ignored and failed and had their lives destroyed. And, you know, I'm given that platform, and I always try to speak the truth as I see it. Now, after that case that I was on, and I didn't know at the time, but at that point in 2008, Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he instructed all police forces, through Gordon Brown, on a circular that I've never seen, but I know through other professionals who worked in the Crown Prosecution Service that it is actually the truth, that a circular was sent out to all police forces telling them they mustn't prosecute these paedophiles because the children were making a decision they were complicit in their abuse. Now, for me, as Director of Public Prosecutions, that is unforgivable.
But Maggie, I do not understand. How on earth can a child be complicit?
They can't be. But, you know, they were blamed for their own abuse and they were judged and, you know, they were categorised as unreliable witnesses. They're not unreliable. They're 11, 12, 13-year-old children who would be given, you know, alcohol beyond their wildest imaginings. They are being passed around like a piece of meat, and by the time they realise that they have been abused, they feel shame, they feel guilt, but the authorities, including the Director of Public Prosecutions and police and social services, it is their legal duty to protect children in our country. So we can't have, I keep hearing this two-tier Keir. Well, I don't just blame Keir Starmer. I blame the whole lot of them. You know, I don't want to just single him out. We've had, you know, many, many years of Conservative rule, and they equally have been negligent in dealing with this crime. We had the National Abuse Inquiry. You know, we're calling now. All the newspapers are saying we need a public inquiry. Let me remind everybody, we've had one. We had the ICSA National Abuse Inquiry. It took 7 years, David, cost £100 million, and 2 weeks of that inquiry was given to the grooming gang problem. And within that 2 weeks, 95% of the time that was allowed to be spoken about this was given to chief constables, to heads of social services. There was one victim allowed to speak. People like me, as a non-institutional core participant, we were denied any right to speak. Our statements were massacred. It was a cover-up, and 20 recommendations that followed after 7 years, not one has been implemented. So, you know, Keir Starmer is not the only one responsible. There has been a whole catalogue of failures. So, you know, it's all right calling for a public inquiry, but the thing is, I don't trust any of them to be entrusted with that public inquiry, because if you don't have the right people who want to see change, you can spend another 5 years wasting your breath in the way that I have on the ICSA inquiry, the Rochdale inquiry, the Augusta inquiry, the Baird review. We get recommendations and we get words and we see no action, and we see repeats of the same failures time and time and time again. And what I want to see is real people who, I'm a spokesperson for the millions and millions of decent, ordinary people throughout this country who look at children and know that we as a society should be protecting those children, whatever it takes. And yet I'm dealing with many victims today in my charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation. We are inundated with desperate victims of all kinds of sexual crime who are waiting for a trial, who are waiting for maybe a prosecution that never comes. And they can wait 2, 3, 4 years for that trial. And yet we see people who say something on social media now, arrested and put before the courts in 3 days, sent to prison for 3 years. We've got things upside down, and I feel a great responsibility to use the knowledge I've gained in 20 years, David, to try and push this forward. And to be honest, I am relieved that we have Elon Musk and other people in other countries who are as horrified by these failures as I still am, because I am sick and tired of speaking to politicians like Rishi Sunak. I've met them all, Rishi Sunak, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel. I have, spoken about this day in and day out for 10 years, and yet Talk have been very good, actually, in keeping the spotlight, as have a couple of other news channels. But by and large, mainstream media, it's a 5-day wonder, and then it fades away again. But it doesn't fade away for the victims. They spend their lives trying to get justice, trying to deal with the trauma, trying to overcome the fact that they have been blamed and criminalised and let down by a country which should be protecting them. So that's why I said what I said. I didn't expect it to, go on the front page of the Daily Mail, but I stand by every word I've said because it is true. Repeated governments, repeated politicians, professionals have failed children monumentally, and I want things to change.
I couldn't agree more in everything you say, and in fact those accounts are so harrowing, reading about these young teenagers who, as you say, were passed around like pieces of meat, and yet when they cried out, when they went to law enforcement, that one girl was told to go away until you're not drunk. She even gave a DNA sample which would have implicated those people. And then, of course, and I mentioned this earlier, in 2012 when Keir Starmer, who was DPP, and I used this word this morning, I said it was word salad. It's utter nonsense, the stuff he came out with. What was going on at that time? He talks about there was a misunderstanding. No, it wasn't. There wasn't a misunderstanding. You did not do what you were meant to do.
100%, David. There was no misunderstanding. How can you misunderstand when a 12-year-old child is being raped? They cannot give consent. So if you're the Director of Public Prosecution and you don't see that that is a criminal offence that needs the full weight of the law thrown against it, in my opinion, you shouldn't be the Director of Public Prosecutions. And right at that time, I was a serving police officer in Greater Manchester Police working on that Rochdale case. And everybody who follows this story will know that, I worked for 4 years to bring the drama Three Girls to the screen, and the drama was a great drama, but it didn't go nearly far enough in holding the police and the CPS to account. I know that story inside out. And one of those children, Ruby in the drama, she was being abused from the age of being raped from the age of 12. She was just 13, and she was made pregnant. The police unlawfully, without her consent, seized the fetus in a termination. 2 years later, I was brought onto that case because the fetus was found in a routine property review in GMP. Nothing had been done about it. And I was asked to bring her on board and her sister to help us put away a very predatory, wicked gang of men who were raping children throughout Rochdale. Now, we had DNA, we had a fetus. I managed to get her to give statements and to agree to work with the police. Even that man, Adil Khan, was not charged with rape. He was charged with sexual activity with a child. He was out of prison in less than 4 years. And people will say, how can that be? That's because they chose to choose to charge him with lesser charges. They're easier to prove. They don't have to do anything other than prove there's a fetus. That, for me, isn't justice, David.
Well, it isn't.
It isn't justice, and it sends a message out that actually it's not that bad. Well, Keir Starmer was involved in that case. Nazir Afzal was the Crown prosecutor. I am still enraged by what they did to those children. Amber was a victim of horrendous rape and abuse. She was portrayed in court as complicit in her abuse, as a madam. It took me 10 years to get the new chief constable to acknowledge she was indeed a victim, that GMP were incompetent in their handling. So all these things, when I talk about this subject, I'm not just talking about one case. I'm talking about thousands of cases that I've been involved in, and all of those victims won't get a voice. So I try and I can never be their voice, but I try and talk about the failures that they all have shared. And the final thing I'd like to say before I let you get a word in, David, is that to date, not one senior police officer, not one chief constable, not one council leader or senior social services leader has been held criminally to account. They haven't even sacked somebody for their gross neglect of duty. And I want to see that happen. You know, you can't just be a public servant and turn away from children and victims whose duty it is for you to protect and then retire as though you've done nothing wrong. I'm sorry, that is just wrong. Every single thread of this is wrong. And, you know, I'm hoping now we're going to get action, because I've seen times like this before when everything focuses on this topic and then it fades away and nothing changes, David. I want to see change, and having Elon Musk come in and an international spotlight shining on the UK, which is meant to be a civilised country. We used to be ahead of the game with the criminal justice system. Now, my heart goes out to serving police officers because they are hamstrung by political manoeuvrings from many parties, and it just isn't good enough.
Maggie, I totally agree. And when you hear testimonials from people like Simon Danchuk as well, the former Labour MP, saying he was told to keep quiet, that actually parliamentary politics superseded any of this. Just in terms of that, you say you don't want a public inquiry, you want police chiefs to be made accountable, to be brought to justice. Also, you talked about the fact you'd spoken to all of the protagonists in all of this. To the Prime Minister, who was DPP, have you spoken to him?
No, I've never yet had the pleasure of meeting Keir Starmer, but I met Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman, and I took victims to speak to them so that victims could be heard. You know, it could be heard from the horse's mouth. I never want to speak on behalf of victims, but I want them to be heard. And they're so easy to dismiss, as, you know, history shows. You know, they deserve to be protected. You know, what I'm saying about a public inquiry is, you know, that is just a title. It is just a word. 7 years in the ICSA inquiry, and what have we gained from it? Nothing. Nothing has changed. So a public inquiry as a title means nothing. It's who's going to lead it. What are we going to achieve? I have seen them as an excuse for another cover-up, for, you know, delaying tactics, for people being given false hope. And that is even worse than doing nothing. I want to see an outsider, truly independent, not a political pawn who will tick a box and we end up with nothing. That is not what I want. Now, is Elon Musk the person to see this forward? I don't know, but I do know that the people that I have worked with before, who I have seen shine a spotlight, we've had words, we've had recommendations, we have had no change and no action, but we do have now public awareness at the highest level. And it is one thing that I will claim some credit for. It is in keeping this in the public arena and making the public aware of what was going on behind the scenes. But we still need action, because we've had, you know, an encyclopedia of words and excuses, and politicians actually wanting to feather their own nest but not putting the neck on the block when it's needed. And You know, I might sound cynical and twisted, but I have lived this for so many years, David, that I know what's needed. I have yet to see that being delivered.
And Maggie, you speak so eloquently about systemic failures, about cover-ups, about not getting to the bottom of this. The fact is, it does seem that people sat on evidence that things weren't sorted out. These poor girls suffered and continue to suffer as a result of what happened to them. And this is all because of political correctness, not actually calling it out for what it was. Can I just ask you, given all of the above, are you confident this couldn't happen again, or do you think that we're still in the same position?
You know, as I briefly mentioned, I set up my own charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation. We are funded entirely by the public. I do not want a penny from the establishment because I want to be able to speak the truth. And in my foundation, we are supporting and advocating for victims of all kinds of sexual abuse every single day. So I can tell you, hand on my heart, that things in the criminal justice system are broken, that victims are being failed on an industrial scale. There are less than 2 in every 100 reported rapes or abuse that ever reaches court. We need to look at a bigger picture, though, David. This isn't just about criminal consequences. It's about societal change. It's about stepping in early. It's about allowing charities like mine to advocate for victims, to support them when the criminal justice system can't help them, because to be honest, if the evidence isn't there, we will never get to court. But that doesn't mean that every victim who's been raped and abused doesn't need support to recover. Trauma, as you know, trauma lasts for a lifetime. And in the foundation, we offer emotional support to victims who have never spoken about their abuse, who have not had criminal cases taken forward and are left just abandoned with nowhere to go. They're the kind of changes that should be part of this conversation. It isn't just about point scoring, about, what a terrible job the police are doing. It's a much, much wider issue than that. And I'm talking today about, because it's in the spotlight, about a public inquiry, but I want victims to be heard, to be supported. I want accountability, criminal accountability, for those chief constables and those senior public officials who have failed repeatedly in their duty. I want to see change really come. And I want to see every victim who goes to the authorities to be heard, to be listened to. And if we can't have a prosecution, they need support in other ways. And that just doesn't happen.
Maggie, thank you so much for speaking so eloquently and also speaking out as well. So many comments saying how much people admire your bravery as well. Maggie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this morning. That's Maggie Oliver. Lots of you getting in touch about this. Martin Black says, this woman is speaking for the country. How can this be ignored? This is Stephanie. Good morning to you. Why hasn't Maggie got an OBE or a knighthood rather than useless politicians and mayors? Another great show. Thank you very much. This is another one Maggie Oliver should chair the inquiry to. I think her point is really valid. What good is another public inquiry which kicks it into the long grass for 7 years? As Maggie says, she wants criminal prosecutions brought against those police officers because they did not take action. Also, there is a huge question about Keir Starmer, about his role as DPP. Why were those cases not followed through? Why were these girls left alone and not believed? After the break, we'll be discussing a very different subject, actually. We'll do a bit of a U-turn. We'll talk about the weather. We've been talking about the winter fuel allowance as well, about pensioners being afraid to put the heating on. We'll talk about what we expect from the weather this weekend and also how that might impact travel. James Wally will join me after the break. This is Talk.
doesn't say the government isn't going to look at the wider problem. So last night, when this story broke, I was hearing from the government that, we're not saying we're not going to do an inquiry. Watch this space. So, and I would urge them, for what my two pennyworth is worth, I would urge them to actually set up a national inquiry that can look at everything in context. I think the government can't do, the central government can't do 20 different inquiries into, there's so many, it's a multi-headed hydra.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we need to look at the thing across the piece.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk. David Bull here, Weekend Breakfast. Let's talk about what's going on this weekend. There are amber warnings for snow and ice being issued for large areas of England and Wales this weekend. Hazardous travel conditions. Let's get the very latest. James Wally, travel journalist and host of the Ultimate Road Trip. Road Trip, that sounds nice. Good morning.
Good morning, David.
Right,
yeah, thanks
what's
for
going on?
Yeah, you're saying amber warnings across parts of the UK from later on this evening. It's an amber alert covering most of Wales and central England from 6 o'clock this evening, and that goes on until midday tomorrow. And then there's an amber alert for northern England from 9 o'clock tonight until midnight on Sunday. The rest of England's covered by a yellow alert, not quite as serious, but there could be some disruptions for the rest of England, but not southern counties and the south west. Scotland, that's covered by ice alerts, yellow alert for ice for overnight, but for Scotland that could impact travel on Monday morning. Weather temperatures expected to rise towards the end or over the weekend, towards the end of the weekend for England and Wales, but Scotland still could be hit by icy conditions, especially into Monday morning. So it's a mixed bag, but a lot of the country, David, covered by warnings of some sort, including, as I say, that amber alert, which says that the Met Office describes as an alert, which means travel could be impacted. So you should potentially think about changing your travel plans over the next 24, 48 hours.
And just in terms of that, I assume the usual advice, just keep an eye on the travel alerts, make sure you contact the operator, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just keep an ear out for problems from local radio bulletins. Check online with National Highways on their website and also on the Met Office website. And just be prepared. If you're in one of the areas in northern England or in Wales or in central England where 30 to 40 centimetres of snow could fall on the higher ground, it's the advice that's given every year during bad weather conditions. Make sure all your levels in your car are topped up. Take warm clothing, take warm drinks and snacks if you're going on a long journey, and also take a power bank for your mobile phone in case you've got a battery problem with your car. But of course, this weekend, a lot of people are going to be travelling back home from maybe New Year events and having been away for New Year and Christmas. Of course, a lot of schools, if they haven't already gone back, go back on Mondays. A lot of people heading back to get ready for the school run on Monday morning. So it's really a question of check before you travel. Rail, again, could be impacted. There was already a problem this morning between Newcastle and Edinburgh. There was an incident on the line. Luckily, those lines have reopened, but the lines in Scotland and to the north between Inverness and Dingwall are closed because of landslips and floods. Oh, and there's also a road closed already this morning, David. The A59 in West Yorkshire is shut near to Skipton. That's because of a landslip from New Year's Day. So that's already shut. And the Woodhead and Snake passes could also close across the Pennines once the snow starts to fall. So keep an eye on that. M61 between Manchester and Preston, that's currently shut. Not weather conditions, but it's a serious crash. So that closure's already in. But hopefully that'll reopen about 11 or 12 today. So National Highways.
Super. James, thanks ever so much. Happy New Year to you. James Wally there, travel journalist and host of the Ultimate Road Trip podcast. Quite fancy a road trip, actually. I'll have to say, by the way, it was very cold this morning when I got up at 2:20. It was terribly barky. Still loads more to come. Given that it's Saturday, of course, it wouldn't be a Saturday without Denya's Delights. That's all coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Now, earlier on, I was talking to Maggie Oliver, former Detective Constable of Greater Manchester Police. She's front page of the Daily Mail. Starmer guilty as anyone over the grooming gangs. It's very difficult to listen to Maggie and not feel moved about how much of her life she's dedicated to getting justice for these young people. And of course, she now has her Maggie Oliver Foundation. And one of the things that I just don't think people understand is the abuse isn't just at that time. It stays with you for the whole of your life. And of course, those feelings, and I've dealt with tons of people who've been through similar circumstances, and the feeling of guilt and the fact that they brought it on themselves, and that has been compounded by the police saying they were complicit in what happened. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely unbelievable. And many of you getting in contact, like Andy here, great show, David. Two-tier honours list. Who would you prefer to have an honour, Sadiq Khan or Dame Maggie Oliver? David, why doesn't Maggie Oliver run an open investigation? Just a thought. This is one of the best shows today, highlighting this horrific story. We need this kept in the headlines. She's such a great lady. That's Michelle from Altrincham. Sue, good morning to you. I asked my MP on several occasions over years why Maggie Oliver was not a dame. She is my hero. Her foundation needs to be funded with public money. I've also begged my MP to do something about the child rape gangs every year for 6 years. They should hide their heads in shame, and those responsible need to be publicly humiliated and need their jobs. Andy just sends 3 words: Dame Maggie Oliver. Let me know your thoughts on all of the above, please. Are you confident that that kind of behaviour can't happen again? Would the police investigate thoroughly now if they had similar allegations brought against other people? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's take a pause, a breather, and I'm delighted to say joining me now, Steve Denyer.
Good morning. I think I can say this for one final time. Happy New Year. I think that's
I think so.
That's
so it's 12th night tomorrow, you know.
Yes,
you've got to take your tinsel down.
There are frozen pine needles everywhere.
Are there?
There's like a track
Did you have a real
coming
one?
in. I didn't know, but everybody else in my apartment block seems to have, and there's a big trail of pine needles now. Everyone takes it down at the same time this weekend.
I probably can't tell you this, but I will tell you this. But when I had my apartment here, I had such a big tree I couldn't get it in the lift. And I couldn't get it out, and you're right, so the minute you move it, it starts shedding, and then the carpet goes green.
Oh, my goodness.
So I had to throw it off the balcony. I mean...
in the middle of the night?
Yeah, well, no, I had to... So I sent my flatmate down at the time, and I sent him out to make sure that there was no one walking and, you know, fence it off because we were on the water at that point. Anyway, we digress.
Do you know what I'm doing straight after this?
I hate to think.
I'm going over to Jane Middlemiss's house to help her with the Christmas tree.
So showbiz.
I know, I mean,
say hi from me.
Of course I will.
Well, we go back to the BBC together.
Of course you do.
Yeah, about 100 years.
Yes,
Big, she was doing Ozone at that time.
Yes, she travelled the world, and I love her. She's my colleague at Virgin Radio, so amazing
stuff. Well, you're
stuff.
very, very important at Virgin Radio.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, you are.
Listen, we're going to get on to a few things you must see this weekend. It's so cold. We'll talk about Lockerbie in a moment with Colin Firth. We'll talk about Better Man. Big story in today's Sun. Has Madonna got engaged? There's you might be able to make out on her finger. Now, there's two really rare things here. They've managed to get a picture of her hand without a glove on it. She never goes out without her hands ungloved. It's page number, I think, 7 in today's Sun newspaper. And if you're watching Talk, we can see the picture right now. She's going to put her palm out, you see, and there's a diamond ring. Now, the guy that she's with there is the new boyfriend, Akeem Morris. Guess how old he is? Now, she's 66.
12 or something. How old is he?
28.
All right, okay.
I wonder what first attracted him to a multi-millionaire.
Wow, quite.
That's very cruel,
I mean, she
isn't
looks
it?
good, though, doesn't she?
Oh, listen, she looks great. I mean, she got married to Sean Penn in the 80s. That didn't work. Do you remember she got married to Guy Ritchie in year 2000?
Well, she's got through them.
I mean, she's written a lot of songs about these relationships that haven't worked out, but good on her. She's in Tokyo at the moment.
How
The
old
whole
is she
family,
again?
66 years old.
Well done, nice effort.
And I think when you see that picture and you'll see it in today's Sun, I think she probably looks the best she's looked for a long time, because she quite clearly was having stuff done, whatever she was having done, but it started to look more and more bizarre, and it looks like there are no fillers anymore, so it looks kind of
it looks
slightly
like
more...
It's settled, doesn't it?
It's settled, yeah.
So, well, and also she had real problems, didn't she, with mobility. We saw her sort of falling around on stage some time ago, so she does look good.
I mean, you know, she was in an emergency unit about 1.5 years ago, and the rumour was that it was some kind of implant that it had split, and she got sepsis, and she was dreadfully ill. So you'd think after having that, you know, that awful shock, that you would go, OK, I'm going to change things, and maybe that's what's happening right now. But great pictures of her and the family in Tokyo.
With a 28-year-old.
With a 28, I mean, you know, what's not to love there?
Well, quite.
Goodness me.
Goodness me.
Should we move on?
Why not?
Gavin and Stacey.
Right, yeah, Gavin and Stacey. So, look, so do you remember I was talking to John Mayer about this, and he said this is why we fund the BBC, so that you can watch shows like Gavin and Stacey. I've never seen it.
Well, I mean, Have
you seen it?
The last one I saw was the 29th. It's interesting. So we spoke about the ratings winner that is Gavin and Stacey, and I quoted, I think, a week ago, that 12.3 million people had seen it, actually watched it, you know, together when it went out. That has now risen to 19.3 million.
That makes
because
it a high rating.
We've been speaking about it. Other people have gone onto the iPlayer. They've watched it in their own time. That's pretty impressive. I mean, it harks back to the last record that was set was 2019 Gavin and Stacey. But before that, you haven't had this big kind of blockbuster Christmas Day special since about EastEnders, you know, with Dirty Den and Ange. I mean, that got 30 million people, but we only have four channels, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
1985. So everybody, we kind of lost that appointment.
I mean, I wasn't born
stuff.
in 85.
No, of course not. No, I mean, and I've just YouTubed it because I don't remember any of these characters. Far too young.
I mean, is it any good?
Gavin and Stacey.
Yeah.
It is. The really special thing about this is it was a beautiful kind of finale. It gave the punters what they wanted. Remember, people have been watching this for 17 years, and there was that 5-year gap. you know, since the last one. The last one was rumoured to be the big finale. So when they wrote this, lots of people were delighted. And cleverly, there's still a few unanswered questions, like Rob Brydon, the fishing trip and stuff, and lots of big kind of streaming services saying, well, actually, we will create a new strand of Gavin and Stacey. So although the main programme, the BBC programme, has finished, it might live on. Ooh. So it's interesting stuff. I mean, it's huge. It's the talking point of this year, of this Christmas. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I need to watch it then. Yeah. Maybe I need to watch it. Just very quickly, before we go to the break, Glastonbury, obviously those tickets are on sale, aren't they? Have they sold out already?
Yes, they have.
Yeah,
it's a big ordeal trying to get these tickets because you have to belong to a ballot. And then, you know, and then you have to go online once you've got the ballot number to try and get the tickets and stuff. So lots of people left very disappointed, even though there's about, you know, it's 300,000 tickets or whatever. It's a huge thing. But this Neil Young saga, this deserves its own soap opera. He said he was going to do it. He was going to headline Glastonbury.
Right.
And then, I think it was 2 days ago, he said he's not going to do it.
Right.
Because he fell out with the BBC and he said, basically, I mean, Glastonbury, hilariously, he's now going to do it.
Oh.
But Glastonbury have said, look, Neil Young is Neil Young. He does things his own way. And I think the BBC wanted him to sign on the dotted line and say, look, you'll be here at this time. You'll be on our show.
And do this
the set needs to be this length. We're going to record it, so you need to be wearing... and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, look, I'm Neil Young. I do what I want to do. So
I'm an artist.
Emergency talks have been had within the last couple of days. We still don't know too much about other big acts, but Sting's knocking around next year. He's doing the likes of Latitude. It would be great to see... I mean, have you got anyone that you would really like to see at Glastonbury? Even though we don't go and we watch it on telly. I'd love to see Madonna there. I think she'd be
I was
great.
about to say Madonna.
She'd be a great artist.
She would be fantastic. I would go for that. But I was weirdly, I was thinking about Glastonbury as I looked out the window this morning when it was freezing cold, thinking, isn't it amazing that people are buying tickets? Honestly, the last thing I want to do is to sit in a tent... in the middle of a field.
I know, but it's something to look forward to. I thought that, but when I went to Latitude last year, the joy and the atmosphere, and it's incredible. I mean, you know, these tickets are pricey, but you get to see hundreds of artists.
I don't know. I think Madonna's a very good shout there, actually. I think some of those big 80s names would be...
You know, Rick Astley did really well a couple of years ago, didn't he?
Talented.
You need someone with legacy.
Is Neil Young... I mean, you know, I know Neil Young is Neil Young. Is he worthy of headlining?
Well, I think so. I mean, he's a legacy artist, and he's very apparently the people at Glastonbury absolutely love him, and they've tried to get him before, and this has actually happened. Although 2 days ago it wasn't going to happen. I don't know.
And
Watch
in 2 days' time,
next June the jury's out, but he might be there.
Exactly. Well, we'll keep a Neil Young lookout.
Okay,
shall we? Yeah, Steve. We'll pause for a minute.
Sure.
We'll continue with Denya's Delights after this break.
He's very happy to take opinions on the UK, also in Germany. Now, whether that money that seems to be dangled in front of reform, whether that materializes, will be very interesting. We're talking sums like 100 million. Reform could make very good weather of that. That could be a real game changer for reforms, expanding itself even when we get up to local elections in May.
Oh, it certainly could be a game changer, and I guess watch that space.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, 9:49 now. Good morning, David. This is Dave. Good morning, Dave. Tell Steve, if he thinks Madonna looks good, he should see my wife. She's an optician. Good one.
Morning, Dave.
Colm, thanks very much for that. We're in the middle of Denya's Delight. Now, Robbie Williams' film, where he's a monkey, which doesn't make any sense to me, you said was really, really good. It's really, really good?
I'm so glad it's getting rave reviews. I mean, even people in the States, the amazing thing about him is he never made it big in the States, and this movie's been released in the States, and people are now going to see it and liking it. I've got a clip. Everyone's talking about it. There was highly rated movie of the new year, Better Man, but he's played by a monkey. Take a look at this.
Of course it is.
Because that is basically it's directed by Michael Gracie. He's the guy that did The Greatest Showman.
Right.
So that's a little example of what to expect.
Sorry, why is he a monkey?
So the reason he's a monkey is because in past life he's always said, especially within the Take That era, that he felt like he was a performing monkey, that he had no actual say in his career or his development, and he goes through this.
I understand that.
He also had this thing, we spoke about this a week ago, where he's got massive imposter syndrome, and when he was younger and he used to look out at the crowd, he used to picture certain people in the audience who hated him, and he used to picture these people as apes. So they kind of thought, well, and the other thing is, by creating an ape, you don't have to cast 3 different Robbie Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Because you just got the monkey face, you just add a bit more kind of hair. Listen, it's bizarre for a minute, but within 3 minutes, you're like, oh, OK, I get this.
And then that clip we saw, that was all obviously AI or...
Computer generated. Yes. They did that with Rocket Man. You know the Elton John biopic? There was certain scenes where you're like, oh, wow, this is like a big kind of theatrical show, and this Robbie Williams movie is very much like that. It's harrowing, it's dark, it's real, but it ends really lovely. And honestly, I haven't cried as much in a film. I mean, maybe it's just the case, when you get over to 40, things things get to you. But it's all
the early mornings, isn't it?
It's the early mornings, isn't it? And the cold weather. But I would give it an easy 8.5 out of 10.
Okay.
It's an hour and 40 minutes. Go there, and you'll realise how much he's overcome over the years, and how lucky we are to still have him, and he's doing really good. He was at the Sydney fireworks a couple of nights ago. None of us could see it, but he looked well.
That was really bizarre.
That was weird.
Really bizarre. Now, you mentioned to me the series Lockerbie. Now, I thought I was watching that, and I ended up, and I pressed the wrong button, and I ended up watching a documentary on Lockerbie, which I'm halfway through. But it's very good.
Yes.
But you're talking about this other show.
So this is the new show. This is on Sky Atlantic, and it's available to watch now. This is Colin Firth, and it's called Lockerbie. And it's Colin Firth. He plays Jim Swire, who's the man who lost his daughter on board that Pan Am flight. The first episode, bearing in mind it happens on the day of the explosion, is incredibly difficult to watch, knowing how this man's life is going to change. But Colin Firth, if there's any actor that can pull this role off, it's emotional. It's really important that I think we remember what happened, and that story's lingered on over the years and through the decades, and still lingers on. There's still so many people responsible for that explosion on that night, And it was before social media, so we didn't have, you know, like the awful events in New Orleans where you have footage and you watch all this because we don't have that. So it's important that these documentaries, as you say, a great Sky documentary. This is the drama, and it's well worth watching.
I mean,
it's a hard watch.
in the documentary itself, just seeing the size of the crater, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
The plane was blown out of the sky. Remember, it came down in a populated area on a Saturday night just before Christmas in 1988, and you know, devastating for everybody involved. But this is very respectful. Good. And very powerful, and I really recommend it. It's on Sky Atlantic, but you can stream it anytime.
So tell me about Sky Atlantic, because other things seem to premiere on Sky Atlantic as well.
Yeah, so it's basically the UK's version of HBO. So Succession, that was really popular. Really popular. I love Succession. It was really great. Really into that. Curb Your Enthusiasm. Lots of the big American imported shows. They've got a lot of money. They buy all these seasons.
Apparently Newsroom as well.
Newsroom is great as well. Honestly, it's full of stuff you can binge on Sky Atlantic, but you just got to have Sky. It's no problem.
Sky.
You got to have Sky.
Also, this evening, ITV, The Masked Singer returns. You'd be good in that.
Thank you. Apparently it's really difficult. I interviewed Tiffany. Do you remember the 80s?
Yes, I think we're alone now.
She played the Eiffel Tower. And she said, basically, they put you in this suit. Yeah. And it's 1,000 degrees.
I bet it is.
And you can't even sing because, you know, it's, you've got a little Madonna mic and stuff, but you're in a furry suit. But she said it's so much fun. And literally, they make them lie to all their friends and their families. If you're a friend of Tiffany's, suddenly Tiffany just disappeared for 2 months and no one knew. But she couldn't even tell her partner exactly what she was doing on a Saturday night. So you've got Mo Gilligan, Davina McCall, Maya Jama, Jonathan Ross and Joel Dommett on this, and it comes back tonight. This was the show that kind of saved the pandemic. Do you remember when we were in that winter lockdown and it was a surprise hit because it's silly and it was fun.
But I guess it's family viewing, isn't it?
It's family viewing, and it goes back to, you know, we always talk about these big shows in the 80s that were just fun. Yeah. And the whole family used to watch it. No one got offended, and it was a great watch. It's on tonight on ITV.
Okay, good.
At 7 o'clock. There's also an Elvis night on BBC tonight. Looking at him. You know, Elvis is an amazing person because he never travelled outside America. So he didn't travel here and perform at different times, you know. He had a twin brother as well. And he bought Graceland before he was 33, I think it was. So it happened very, very young. All eyes on this artist that changed everything. Changed the music map. But tonight you get the movies, the documentaries, and if you want to find out all these facts, it's fascinating.
Do you know, when I was much, much younger, I remember watching those Elvis movies. I mean, he was incredibly versatile, wasn't it?
Oh, gosh, yeah, absolutely. And a real trendsetter. There was a great Baz Luhrmann movie about Elvis that I watched on the plane the other week. Really great, really great. He was a trailblazer.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very
so
much.
that's looking good.
Okay, great stuff. Steve, thank you ever so much. Lovely to see you as well. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Last time. Final time.
Final time for Happy New Year. Okay, so lots of messages coming in. Claire, Doctor, please give Gavin and Stacey a go. I think you'll love it. That's Claire in Buckley. Okay.
17 years too late.
I know. Okay, super. Thank you for that. Just very quickly, Alan in Middlesbrough, great show. All these lefties, Labour MPs criticising Elon Musk for interfering with British politics seem to have forgotten how 100 Labour Party members went to North Carolina to interfere with the US election by supporting the Democrats. Well remembered. They have very short, selective memories as well. So many others. Peter in Suffolk, good morning, David. We always hear about needing to insulate homes. All new builds have been insulated for about 40 years. Most others have had retrospective insulation for the same sort of time. So where are all these houses that are not insulated? I live in one that isn't insulated, but that's because it's very old. Also, David, this is Stuart. If heat pumps were better than boilers, people would buy them without nudging. We were talking about this nudge unit, the same one that was used. The Behavioural Insights Team, I think it's called, its proper name. It was used in COVID. It's now being used to make you buy a heat pump, probably an electric car as well, which is interesting. And they're having to discount the electric cars because no one wants to buy one. That's interesting as well. Sue, Happy New Year. The Labour government is absolutely incompetent.